Hello and welcome to the CBB Super Show. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Disu85. I am ready to go. Got my rec specs on, just chilling, watching basketball games, grinding throughout. Got a little bit of new lighting above me, but I don't know how I feel about it. Makes it look kind of dark in here, so I'll have to play around and see if that gets to get better. But the Super Show is always powered by the FTN Network, where we pride ourselves on not only being winners for ourselves, but winners out of you guys as well. The tournament has been fantastic so far. You know, we messed around with the NIT playing games. You know, there's all that high variance, people feeling down. But bam, that first round, first day one on Thursday, big time takedowns for multiple of our subs. Mike does well. A bunch of you guys did well, just fantastic. Yesterday went well. The AJ Mitchell call didn't work out so well for Santa Barbara, but we were able to get through it. Darnell Brody gives us a big low-owned game. And then, lo and behold, today we have the show core, Demoy Hodge, Missouri in general, just a really rough outing for them. Coach Gates, very, very terrible job of making adjustments. Continues to just allow Nick Honor to put his head down, dribble into traffic, and lose the ball. I mean, just speechless with how bad the in-game adjustments were there for Gates. Hodge gets just blasted multiple times. No foul call, hits the back of his head, misses 8 or 9 minutes of the game. I know he wasn't doing particularly well before that, but he had just gotten a steal and took it coast to coast for a bucket right before he got that. He didn't get a concussion, but it sure as hell looked like it right before that. So he was just about to start cooking and doing some things in that game, and then that took him out of it. So what can you do? Well, we rely on our guy, Dylan Disu, who people are just, they've been late to get to him. What does he do tonight? Puts up another massive outing. 28 points on 14 of 20 shooting, 10 rebounds and assists, 2 steals. Like, Disu looked so good, and it feels really good to be early on a play like that. We've been using Disu for the past 2.5 to 3 weeks. Low ownership each and every time. He had one slate where he was semi-high owned, and it was after he went off at like 4, that cheaper price. He got to like a low 5K. Everybody used him, and then his price went up. Everybody jumped off thinking that it wasn't going to continue. But us at FTN continue to plug him out, and we know that DVP-wise, the front court versus Penn State, it's not the top 1. It's not the top 2. Maybe you're not the top 3 DVP spot. But you better believe it's a top 5 DVP spot. And when a quality big man like Dylan Disu, who is able to show off some athleticism, grab every rebound, hit that little baby hook shot that he had going, the little mid-range jumper he had going, showing off his post moves, athleticism just way too good for anyone on Penn State. Kevin Ajayi, no chance. Evan Mahaffey, no chance. Michael Henn, no chance. There was nobody on the team capable of getting him. And Texas was in such control in that first half when they were feeding Disu and featuring him. And if you guys that, normal that watch the show regularly, I said, this team feeding Disu, they're just way better. Timmy Allen went out for a few games. The Texas team suddenly looked a hell of a lot better than they had been. Allen's back. That's going to upset the flow of things. But they actually continued to go to Disu. And it seemed like Timmy Allen realized his place on this team is better as a semi-facilitator, grabbing rebounds, making sure the rest of the guys are doing what they're supposed to do, and even taking a semi-leadership role. I was kind of proud of Timmy today. He looked like a leader out there for today's game. And if that's going to be the new Timmy Allen, watch out. But they went away from that. You notice when Penn State started hitting some threes, all of a sudden Andrew Funk, who was super hot on the round 1 game, started knocking down a couple triples after he was just being handcuffed. Cameron Winter hit some tough shots. They did a nice job really negating what Jalen Pickett wanted to do and force him in a lot of turnovers. But there was a period there really critical where it became 58-55. And I sent a tweet saying, this is not rocket science. You got to feature Disu. You got to get him the ball. When you guys are giving him the ball, there's no chance for them to stop you. You go away from him, suddenly you're down by 3. And obviously I didn't get them to do it, but I'm glad the coaching staff realized it. That minute forward, they went to Disu, and for their last 15 points, he scored 10 of the last 15. He got them a lead of like 5 or 6, and it was over at that point. There was just no stopping him. He had 6 points right in a row, back to back to back. Penn State had the wind out of their sails. Game, set, match. Dylan Disu, I don't care what price he is. If they come out swinging and they price him at $9K next week, I care not. I will be rostering him. I actually hope he is super expensive so people keep fading him. We've made a decent chunk of money off of Disu the last 3 weeks, especially on round 1, and I'm feeling extremely excited and good about this Texas team. Crazy amount of upsets happening in the tournament. We're seeing guard play continue to dictate who advances, who doesn't. Free throws winning ball games, all the cliches that you can think about. Tiger Campbell hits 12 of 12 today. UCLA survives a tough test from a workman-like Northwestern team. They don't do anything super special, but, they were chipping away there. And Bailey, who was really good in that first half, he started to shrivel a little bit in the moment. Singleton looked like he blasted his ankle to oblivion, which they can really not afford another injury on this team. And Hawkes was doing his thing. But when at the end of the game on the line, you need free throws. I always talk about it. You want to roster these guys who are going to make free throws. Tiger Campbell made it to the line, hit all of his free throws. UCLA wins the game. Wasn't the best game out of Tiger Campbell. I know we can continue to go to him. 12 points, 7 assists, 3 rebounds, 2 steals. Obviously would have liked more. The slate ending up being relatively lower scoring. So going forward here with these slates that have the defensive-minded teams, you're not going to have to necessarily get these 7, 8X scores. You're going to be just fine with a score like that out of Tiger more often than not the rest of the way. So I feel pretty good about how that ended up. Bailey did look good, like I said, in the first half, and UCLA is moving on. The craziness that is Princeton advancing is pretty wild. That region here, the South, is going to open up a little bit. I said Baylor, Coach Drew, do you really want to pick against them? I don't. I know that a lot of people picked Arizona coming out of here, but assuming that Baylor can hold off Creighton and win going up against Princeton, it looks like a really good bet for them to make the Elite 8. We are also talking about Bama here. They're fighting off a Maryland squad. Looks like that's just about to be over. Yeah, Maryland's done. So they'll be facing San Diego State. That should be a fun game. We did see Houston get pushed by Auburn in what amounted to basically a home game for Auburn. First half, they dominated. Houston started to pick it up, and we saw some really good outings out of Sasser. Jarris Walker looked nice. They ended up doing some good things there. So the winner of the Miami-Indiana game gets Houston next. That's going to be an interesting one. We're going to, of course, talk about that. Winner of Pittsburgh versus Xavier getting Texas. For DFS purposes, I did tweet this. We want Xavier to win. I think that's a better matchup overall for DFS. I think Texas beats either one, so it doesn't really matter. But for my DFS purposes, I prefer Xavier. For my future bets that I have on Texas, I prefer Pittsburgh. We'll see where it ends up. Ultimately, it matters none to me. Arkansas upsetting Kansas by 1. That was a crazy one. Devo Davis continues to just crush it. Please, God, DK next week, price Devo Davis at 8K so I don't have to continue to waffle on his price of 5, 6K and not use him. It feels really bad. St. Mary's and UConn. I have UConn coming out of this region as long as they can survive that tough game against St. Mary's. I like their chances against Arkansas, but that's going to be a nice game either way. UCLA will get the winner of TCU Gonzaga tomorrow. Talk about that one as well. And then the East region, which is completely just blown up. Duke, bye-bye Duke. Yes. Going up against the winner of Fairleigh Dickinson, FAU. And then we got Kentucky, Kansas State, Michigan State, Marquette. Some really good games coming up here. Really, really pleased with the fact that Duke is out. I did not want to hear about Duke on the ESPN machine and on the sports media and all the Duke talk that there would have been to follow that. If Duke would have made the Final Four the first year after Coach K, there would have been no freaking stopping the sports media world from talking about it. And I just didn't want to hear it. I just did not want to hear it. And thankfully we don't have to. So say what you will about Rick Barnes. He got past the second round. One of the few times that he normally does. He's into the Sweet 16. I'm still not buying into them, but it's certainly setting up here in the East for them to have a chance to come out of it because the Spartans are going to beat Marquette tomorrow. Let's be real here. Kansas State versus Kentucky. Kentucky's favored there. I think Kansas State has a good chance of beating them, though, without Severe Wheeler. Coming out of there, it doesn't really matter because Sparty's going to beat them as well. And then Tennessee, they're probably, what's going to happen here is FAU is going to beat Fairleigh Dickinson. Tennessee is going to fall asleep at the wheel thinking that they can beat FAU, even though they don't have Ziegler. FAU is probably going to beat Tennessee. And then the Spartans, who under legendary coach Tom Izzo will never overestimate an opponent, will end up coming out of this region and making the Final Four, thus making your guy Dub Deuces look like a genius for picking them out into the Final Four. Alabama, Texas, UConn, Michigan State. My Final Four remains intact. We'll see if it is after tomorrow. We'll have to see. Shaping up for that UCLA-UConn game, which I think is a very, very good matchup. As long as UCLA can get Bonner and Singleton, these guys healthy, I feel bad for the Bruins because if they keep losing guys, it's going to get to a situation where they're just going to gas out. And any minutes extra for Mac Etienne or Nueba is really not a great thing unless they're playing a lower caliber team, and there's really no more lower caliber teams on the schedule for them the rest of the way. All right, we'll see how we finish up here. This game's finishing up, so we'll check out the 2-2-2 and see what's going on. Let's check the chat here and see. My man Alex Disu call when everyone else is worried about minutes. We don't worry about minutes here, brother. Here's the thing. Razzle in the chat there talking about Disu. Love it. Robert, sick Disu call. Can't believe it was 8% in GBB. I can. Tyga gets there in the end. So here's the thing with it, man. This is when I pride myself here on the show. I really, really pride myself on making these kind of calls. And they're not always right. I mean, look at Dodge, right? Or Cousin Dodge would have actually showed up today. Look at if you're not in the Discord, you won't understand that call. I'm not going to talk about it. But Demoy Hodge, I was all in on Demoy Hodge, right? He did so well in round one. Low ownership there. This Missouri game, I thought for sure he was going to have a nice outing against Princeton. He did not. Again, I really feel like he was just about to start because in that first round game there, Hodge, he had a pretty quiet first half, right? Like 12, 13 fantasy points, ends at 40. He had just gotten a steal, just took it to the rack. Like I was begging Missouri to stop settling for bad threes that they just weren't making and take it to the hole. And he finally did. And what happened? He scored instantly. And like literally the very next play, he gets blasted. And I just don't want to blame an injury for that one because we'll never know if he would have turned it around or not, but I feel like he would have. But we're not always right. But I definitely want to pat ourselves on the back for the Disu play. Christian Bishop, it didn't quite work out doing the whole pairing thing with him, but Disu being so low owned, like it didn't matter. Thankfully, it didn't matter what the hell Bishop did. And that's what's kind of the point of pairing them together. Razzle and I last night were talking about kind of alleviating, that, and we wanted them to combine for much more, but Disu did his job. And at the end of the day, it really came through. But the thing is, everybody, yes, worried about Disu's minutes. Oh my God, he's not playing 30 minutes. Oh, he's only playing 20, 21. But he kept on scoring and putting up these huge totals. His fantasy point per minute number when he's at Vanderbilt was very high. He's playing this role with Texas where he's able to play a lot more like at Vandy. He's being featured a lot more. He didn't need more than 20 minutes against Colgate to put up 34 against a good Kansas team that they just, blew their doors off. He only needed 21 to put up 30. TCU, he only needed 23 to put up 31. Oklahoma State, he got that 32 minutes. And I said last night, oh my gosh, we're in a situation here where if the games start getting closer, and they will, if the coaching staff is smarter, they're going to start playing Disu more. If you give Disu 30 to 32 minutes, he's going to break the slate. That wasn't the exact quote last night. I'm running on literally like 2 hours of sleep over the last 3 days, but it was something to that effect. And you saw it. He got 31 minutes, 20 shots, 20 shot attempts. Like, damn, man, it just feels so good when a play like that works out and it goes out the way that you want it to. And I was really worried there that Texas was going to blow it, keep taking these bad shots. And I know I say guards matter in March, and they do. Like eventually Carr and Rice, who we saw in the first round, do really well. Like they're going to have to take games over. But when you have such an obvious mismatch that can be exploited time and time again, that's one of those things where you're like, okay, I need our guards. But in this matchup against Penn State, they're a little bit better on the perimeter. Let's just keep giving it to Disu. He's just way too much. He's way better than anybody on this Penn State roster in terms of athleticism, and his post moves were just nasty. This is the Dylan Disu that I love. I'm actually looking at he's won us a bare amount of money, and I'm actually looking for a Dylan Disu jerseys at the moment. Kind of expensive, so if anybody has a jersey plug out there, definitely hit me up later. I'm kind of looking at the Dylan Disu, the cream colored jerseys with the cursive Longhorns on it. Those are nasty. I found one for like $75, but I would obviously like to get a discount because, we got kids over here. We're broke. Even though we won some money, the missus already laid claim to that money won. So, I need a discount on these jerseys. But that cream-colored Longhorns jersey is definitely sick. I need to get that ASAP and wear it before their next game. But yeah, I'm happy that worked out for everybody. Sorry about Demoy Hodge. I can only do so much and try my best here with all the calls. But Missouri really, really pissed me off. I didn't tilt as hard as round one. I spent a lot of my tilt reserves during round one. So I didn't have a lot, but I am replenishing those tilt reserves here as we speak. And tomorrow I'll be ready to go full bore, tilting my face off as usual. All right. There's a lot of you trickling in here. If you guys are watching live, thank you. I'm wearing the rec specs. I've gotten to the point where I haven't slept in so long that my eyes are starting to burn. If you guys wear contacts out there, when you go to put it on, it's like, you start hopping around trying to make it stop. So I got the Wilhelm Bradenbach specs on. I'm ready to do this thing with you guys. We're going to break it down game by game. I am flying solo tonight unless Raz is in the chat there, if he wants to jump on and talk a little bit, he's welcome to, but it seemed like he was a little bit tired. So I don't want to bother anyone. I've been, going on so late lately and people are, I think I'm wearing some folks out. So I just decided to do this thing solo. We are going to take a couple days off after this. So obviously no shows the next few days. We'll see what shapes up for the NIT and CBI slates if they have any of those on Monday, Tuesday. I haven't looked at the schedule to even be able to tell you one way or another. If there is, we'll have write-ups for that. We'll have some Discord chats for that. But otherwise, the next CBB Super Show will come through and live to you on Wednesday night, breaking down that Thursday set of games for the Sweet 16. We'll be here Thursday night, breaking down the second day of the Sweet 16, and then Friday and Saturday night as well, doing the Elite Eight. Then we'll have the big Final Four show, National Championship Showdown show, and then that's pretty much it. I do plan this year during the off season, I'll be doing WNBA. I always do that. But I'm going to do some shows like around transfer portal, some other stuff, less DFS and fantasy focus, but more on just like the college basketball side itself. I've already kind of started to talk to FTN and see if they'll allow me to do that. Sounds like I can. And there are some plans to have special guests. I had the coach of UAB, Andy Kennedy, all lined up to go on last year when I was going to do shows like that. But I got sick and then something with my schedule happened and then he stopped responding to me. So we'll see if we can get him on there. And I also had, my man Johnson from Oregon transferred to Pittsburgh. He was going to come on. Then he had some transfer stuff going on. And he couldn't come on and he had to stop answering as well. So we'll see what happens with him if he come on. But I'm gonna definitely have some stuff going on. I've been talking to some high school recruits. I'm out here trying to do the sports media thing because ultimately I don't want to have to work a day job. And if I can turn this into something where we're doing something beyond just DFS and sports media in general, that's the ultimate goal. I mean, Randall's already got Big East tournament credentials. He was literally at the Big East tournament with media credentials. That would be a big time dream of mine to go to the Pac-12 tournament and be on the court and hanging out, talking to people. So appreciate you guys who continue to support us doing that. I know I'm a pretty goofy guy, but I definitely want to be serious about this industry and continue to do this. We've been doing it since 2014 on Blog Talk Radio when I had like 2 listeners and Johnny used to call in and just ruin the show with his takes. But you know what? We love Johnny. He's a good guy. Shout out to him. All right, let's go ahead and get into it here. Let me get this off my screen. And we'll jump in. Scott TSU has entered the chat. What's up, Mr. SDP Solutions? That's my boy. LASIK eye surgery was the best money I ever spent. You know what? People have told me to get LASIK a few times. I was really scared at first, and I wanted to see like the first decade or two and make sure like, it wasn't going to pop up and be like, if you had laser surgery in 2014, blah, 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 and you have gonorrhea and this, and your pecker fell off and all this other stuff. I was just wanting to see if like that kind of thing would happen. Sounds like they got it pretty well figured out now with the mirrors and everything else. So yeah, I definitely think that is in the cards for me here eventually. Certainly have a little bit of extra funds to do so now if the wife doesn't take all of it. So let's get into the slate here. We have an 8-gamer. I've just spent the last 10 minutes talking about something you guys probably don't care about. So just thanks for humoring me on that. Appreciate it. Use you guys as a little bit of a therapy session sometimes. Also very tired. This morning on the betting show, Randall, who's also not slept, was so tired that he had a owl stuffed animal. And he was doing the show from under his table with the owl above him for like 5 minutes. No, it wasn't quite 5 minutes, but it was a truly transformative experience because he's such a serious guy. I mean, he's a really smart and really, really good guy. Not just saying that because he's our boss. He's a really good guy. And he was doing some funny stuff this morning. So, but damn, he's a smart guy. He kills it on the betting side. All right, first game on the slate here, Pittsburgh versus Xavier. So this is for the right to face our Texas boys. And I say our Texas boys because I am really officially all over the Texas bandwagon at this point. Have picked them to win the tournament. I am fully 100% on Texas. And I like to make fun of Texas football as much as anyone, as much as Scott TSU, as much as anybody, you know, the whole like we're back and then they lose, you know, the next 7 games. Like I love that about Texas football. But Texas basketball right now is primed to make us a lot of money over the next 2 and 3 weeks. So we're going to back them. But Pittsburgh versus Xavier. Pittsburgh ends up being the play-in game winner to make the second round. I would have had my money, and I did, on ASU. They collapsed there at the end, didn't get through. Pittsburgh does. So 11 of 12 tournaments with the play-in winner to the second round. Remember that for next season when you guys are placing bets and doing your brackets, that is play-in game winners almost always going to make that second round. Xavier defensively, they have really not been that great the last maybe month or two of the season. We saw them give up scores of, you know, to DePaul, a big game against DePaul where they gave up 84 points to them. We're on the brink of being just, you know, destroyed by them. They were playing so well. They took care of business at Creighton, but they gave up almost 70 to a very bad Butler team, 90 to Providence. These are games that they won, but still giving up a ton of points. And there's going to be the opportunity for Pittsburgh to put up a lot of fantasy points here for us, for sure, especially maybe even a little bit of overtime opportunity if Pittsburgh has the play-in game winner, you know, mojo going and a potential Sweet 16 berth on the line. We could see Pittsburgh play well. I do say that Capel's not the best in-game adjuster either. We saw some really bad coaching blunders today. We've seen a lack of adjustments and just overall some bad decisions. And that tells me that Capel might very well have a hard opportunity here. Like I could see Pittsburgh jumping out to the lead, Xavier, you know, mounting a comeback, a particular matchup working for Pittsburgh, them going away from it, and then all of a sudden the game's out of reach and they lose. Like that's probably going to end up happening. Hope that it remains close, though, for the entire duration. That's what we definitely want to see. Xavier, at this point, the game against Kennesaw State was stressful for sure for them. You know, Kennesaw State was playing really well. They looked fantastic. They just didn't have enough juice at the end to get through there. Our man Tyrell Burden had 14 points. Could have done more for us. He shot 6 of 16 from the field. Also 2 of 5 from the foul line. He was a 66% shooter. I was worried about that might haunt us. It did. He also had 7 rebounds, 2 assists, though. So he did a little bit of everything. He had about 25, 26 fantasy points, got to about 4X, but I was certainly hoping for a little bit more there from our guy Burden. The Pittsburgh matchup to really look at here going up against Xavier is going to be more for me on the guard side. I think they can exploit a little bit more, but the DFS options and where the public and the industry are going to go is still with guys like Guillermo Diaz-Graham. We were also first on him. Remember we played him at Georgia Tech. He played like 3 minutes. So I'm patting myself on the back, but please know I told all of you to play him that day and he played 3 minutes. So I also cost you some money that day as well. So I apologize for that. And Blake Hinson, who's 6'9", both of those guys, I think will draw some ownership here. Makes a lot of sense because their prices are reasonable. Guillermo, it scared a little bit about, you know, people yesterday because Federico was available to play. A ton of people actually jumped off. He still had decent ownership, but I have to think at least like 15 to 20% of the field jumped off because he ended up being like 38 to 40%. And prior to that Federico news, if he wasn't 60 to 70% owned, then there's a much bigger edge in college basketball tournament time than even I thought there was, because he was a fantastic play across the board. And even with the fact that Federico was available, once it was announced Guillermo was starting, it made literally 0 sense not to use him, honestly. and his price at 5.3 might even scare some people away. But as long as he continues to start, I think he's fine. Using him against that Xavier front court is also going to be fine. We know Jack Nunge is a little bit more finesse than violence. He's going to try to drag people out to 3-point line. Guillermo Diaz-Graham is not afraid to do that. He actually prefers to shoot long-range jumpers. He also likes to block shots. He can do a little bit of everything. He has that Chet Holmgren, form to him. He's a little bit, got the frame where it looks like he's going to break his legs just running up and down the court. But he's one of those guys that has a lot of talent. He's very skilled. He's still raw, but you can see he's just oozing with upside. And this time next year, when he's got a full season under his belt as a starter, he's going to be fantastic. And it's already been announced that John Hughley, Pittsburgh's, star in the making, and their guy that they were going to lean on for their next 2 to 3 years, has hit the portal. So he either saw a situation here with Diaz-Graham that he couldn't beat him out, or he just, no longer wanted to try to play with Capel anymore. And I have a feeling it was a little bit of a combination of both. He also hasn't been able to get healthy at all. And there was a little bit of animosity there, it sounds like, between Hughley and Capel. So he's gone. That means Diaz-Graham and his brother are going to be here to stay. They also have, a recruiting class coming in and the transfer portal, which obviously Capel will be able to hit. He does so very, very well. Brought in Cummings, Greg Elliott, Jamarius Burton. So they'll be fine here at Pittsburgh, and they've got a pretty good future. But those are the guys, Hinson and Diaz-Graham, that I think we'll see people on. And I probably will use Diaz-Graham myself as well. I'm usually a big Blake Hinson guy, but I'm not on him here, even though the price at 6.9 is fine. I usually like to use him when he's going up against a very prevalent zone defense, and a bad one at that, Syracuse, Notre Dame, like those kind of opponents. That's when it's best to use Hinson. I do have interest in Jamarius Burton at 7.2. He's kind of got those posh play vibes. Not necessarily going to definitely be on him just yet. I want to work through the entire slate, and I have been looking at it at length today. But I think he's the guy that ends up being the highest scorer from this one and from the Pittsburgh side, and he's going to have some of the lower ownership. So I'm really interested in him. I think he could do what Burden did as far as adding rebounds, assists, points, but do it much better and score at a much higher level, because Burton is going to be relied upon a lot more than Burden was. He's a much more gifted scorer. He's not fearful of anything. He's not afraid to make contact. He will get to the foul line. He does a little bit of everything. He's an 84% free throw shooter as opposed to 66% of Burden. That makes me feel a lot more confident. 100 makes on 119 attempts, just about automatic there for Jamarius Burton. 25% shot rate, 26% usage rate, shooting about 31% from long range. Not really his game. He's going to be the one driving to the basket, dishing out. He has a 28% assist rate. I just really like the development where Burton has been able to take his game since he's been able to transfer here. So that's kind of where I'm looking. I think it's contrarian, big surprise, right? Me contrarian. Oh my gosh, what? Compared to the rest of the field. And Hinson, I'm just going to be down on. I do think Hinson has a chance to be good here, but I just think there's a little bit of downside. He's also been taking less shots lately because of the emergence of Graham. Burton, who, in this tournament games here, if it's close, they're going to go to him more, not Hinson. We know Cummings has been taking shots, and then Greg Elliott's pretty much anytime he gets a look at it, he fires away as well. So Hinson's overall shot rate and usage rate seemingly has gone down over the last couple of games, heading through the ACC tournament and in the play-in game as well, in that first round matchup. So we've had a chance to see Pittsburgh a lot lately, and it just seems like Hinson is on the downside a little bit here. So if he were to be lower owned, I'd be interested, but 6.9 still high enough to where if he, takes only 7 shots, makes one of them, puts up a sub 20 fantasy point score, he could do a lot of damage to your lineup, unless you hit on some lower owned plays, which is definitely possible. We overcame the Mitchell play yesterday, so it's not a death sentence by any means, but I would hate to be in the first game, play a guy that's already a little volatile, have a brick, and then you're having to chase the rest of the day trying to figure out what you want to do. It's a very, very difficult situation to be in, and it's no fun. And it's part of the reason why earlier today I was having that debate, Jaden Leday, what do I want to play him, or do I want to go to Bishop and Gurley, or do I want to, for value? I just kept having this debate with Leday, and I ended up getting off of him in my main, used him in my alt. Of course, that didn't help me very well there. But just the plays itself, and you don't want to let the times of the games really mess up your strategy. I know that's not the best way to think of it sometimes, but I'm a reformed late game hammer guy. But I do worry about these early games for the tournament sometimes. And my old friend Scott not TSU Scott, but Saw. He was very on point with this last couple of years. These kids, early morning games, sometimes they come out really flat. They were staying up late, even in these tournament games, and there's the reason to believe. And you look at these morning games the last 2 or 3 days. That Maryland West Virginia game to kick the tournament off, like the first half was atrocious. I think there's something to it with these early morning games and some of the flat play that starts out. So just be a little bit careful before you decide to stack it up or anything. But a highly owned Blake Hinson just sounds like a good fade spot for me. And of course, Federico being available, he played 11 minutes. If he were to start and Graham goes back to the bench, I think that ultimately changes a lot. Graham becomes more of a secondary option because of where his price is at. But I think at this point, it would be silly for Capel not to keep going to him because he's been so good. But he may work Federico into more of the minutes this game, play him closer to 20. He might have a better time trying to check a guy like Jerome Hunter, who is, I think, a little too tough for the Grams. So we'll see how that shakes out. But there is some potential here for the minutes to get messed with. On the Xavier side, it continues to be really just, the realistic options. Jack Nungy, of course, Colby Jones, Soli Boom, that's the three-headed monster that are priority plays when you're looking at Xavier normally. And then you have Jerome Hunter, Adam Kunkel, and Desmond Cloud as your secondary options. Kunkel's down there at 5'6", which makes him an interesting kind of semi-value play. Now that we're in the tournament, we're getting into the smaller slates. We're going to start looking at value as sub 6Ks instead of sub 5K like we normally do during the season. Kunkel's somebody who I have been writing off pretty much for the last almost 2 months of the season because he got up to 7K. He's very hit or miss sometimes with his production. His shot taking sometimes evaporates. Like we've seen him shoot only 3 times in the game. We've seen him shoot all the way up to 20 times in the game. So it's really risky sometimes to use him when he's up over 6K and 7K. But at 5'6", it makes a lot of sense. He played 35 minutes against Kennesaw. He had to. He had 8 points, but it was really impressive the way he initiated and ran the offense for Soli Boom. 6 assists for Adam Kunkel. He was really, really good at finding guys open. He was calling the plays, just really doing a lot of good things and not looking to be the guy that stands in the corner and just shoots threes because he's filled that role before as well. And we know that. If this version of Kunkel is here to stay and he's going to run the offense, I think at 5'6", he becomes kind of a no-brainer type play because he's going to be able to rack up stats in a multitude of ways and won't be required to shoot a bunch. Against Marquette in that game in the conference tournament they lost, he shot 17 times. He was more of a stand in the corner guy, but he made 4 of his threes. And you see he produced like that as well. He put up 24 fantasy points in that role. And then he put up 24 fantasy points against Kennesaw in more of a facilitator role. So that does make me interested in Kunkel because I think he performs here whichever way they're going to end up using him. And the fact that, Xavier continues to be banged up and guys are wearing down, this is going to necessitate Kunkel doing a little bit more than what he normally does because Soli Boom is obviously playing banged up. Like he doesn't have a serious injury, but that guy is not healthy. And then same thing with Cloud, at 4'3", he can come in and initiate some offense. He's a little bit more of a riskier play, but at 4'3", we know he's going to play 20 minutes at minimum. He took 0 shots against Kennesaw, so, he's pretty raw in that regard. I think the moment was a little big for him, and that you could see he was not going to take any risks on his shots. He did have 4 turnovers as well, which wasn't great. Now that he's a little bit more settled down, I'll look for him to play better in this one, but he's definitely not a priority play. I'm not starting my lineup with him. If I'm running alt builds and I need to get some pay-ups in and he's the value I need to do it, then I'm fine there, but I am certainly not looking to play him in my main lineup. I think Kunkel's cheap enough at 5'6" that we can look at him and use him as our main team guy. When it comes to the other 3, though, I'm not talking about Jerome Hunter, and Hunter's fine at 6'3". Hunter was crushing Kennesaw State. I don't necessarily think he repeats that performance, but he's okay at 6'3" if you want to use him. But when it comes to the Nungy Jones Boom group, I think I'm still putting Kobe as the 3rd priority. His price got up over 9 last slate. He was fine, but it's so high for him. He is technically and typically the safest guy on the roster there when it comes to paying up. He's typically going to be putting up 32 to 35 fantasy points, but there is a lack of upside there sometimes for him, and he is capped usually at the mid-30s score, and lately we've seen him hitting even less than that. So I do feel like he is last on my priority list in terms of main team. GPP-wise, of course, I want to have some Colby Jones in case he does blow up. I think I'm back on Jack Nungy to a degree. I ended up using him yesterday in my main. A little bit of a weird first half for him, but he ended up playing well. He was airballing threes. It was kind of a frustrating offensive game for him, but he did have 11 rebounds, 2 blocks, 2 steals, and that's where he's going to come in to play here at 8-5 and be able to do some things for us peripheral-wise, and then hopefully have a game where he puts up 20-plus real points. So if that happens, that's when the stars align and he puts up that slate-breaking score. So he's my favorite Xavier play of those 3. I'm not sure just yet if he will go into my main, but I'm definitely considering it. And the forward position isn't as bad this slate as it was today's. So we don't have to feel like, oh, I got to pay up for a forward or I got to throw this value in there. Like, we have options this time at forward, and that's a good thing, because usually these tournament slates, we've been having some struggles trying to find enough forwards to really fill out a lineup, which is why we end up playing somebody like Christian Bishop today when we normally wouldn't. And then Sully Boom, kind of that second, priority list for me. He's going to have the ball in his hands a lot, but like I said, he just doesn't look healthy to me. He looks gassed out. He's been playing a ton of minutes all season long. That lack of bench has really started to wear him down. He also, playing at UTEP, didn't get to be in a lot of positions like this. So it is a little bit of a different experience for him. But I think he looked good enough in that Kennesaw game, and he played just about every single minute, that he's not going to back out of the moment or melt or anything. But I definitely feel like he's a little bit more risky than people probably realize. I think people will go to plug him into their builds at 8-2 and feel pretty safe about it. But I just feel like he's deferring a little bit more than he normally is, and he's not even getting the assists that he was before. It almost seems like if he's playing off the ball, then he's really not even going to be that valuable, even at this 8-2 price, which a month and a half ago at 8-2, he would have been a lock and load because of how good he was playing. So Jack Nunge, Adam Kunkel, Jamarius Burton, semi-posh play. He's not the official posh play, so don't hold me to that just yet. But by the end of the show, I will tell you one way or another. And then Guillermo Diaz-Graham for me. Expect Blake Hinson and Diaz-Graham to be popular as of now. All right, moving on to the next game here. Oh, my God. Is that hold on. Wait a minute here. Wait a minute. Johnny, wow, you must have felt like the bat signal was out for you, Johnny, because I just brought you up, my friend. I just literally brought you up. You must have had your ears burning there, buddy. Wow, the whole gang's here. The whole gang is here. Now I just got a jolt of life here. Hey, Jody, glad you're here. My man Johnny. Johnny is here, man. We had some fun times. I'm gonna have to show you guys another time we'll talk about it. And not on the FTN Network, Johnny, but me and you will do a show together, maybe on my Twitter or something like that. But I appreciate you smashing the like button, and I appreciate you being here, Johnny. Love you. You know that. You're my brother. All right, moving on here. Let me get myself back together. All right, Kentucky versus Kansas State. I can't believe Johnny's here, man. This is awesome. Kentucky, I did not expect them to win that Providence game. Very, very good game for Kentucky, man. They absolutely just shut down any of the, revenge narrative stuff that I was trying to push, other people were trying to push. Bryce Hopkins was an absolute just non-factor. He played 39 and a half minutes, so basically the entire game, non-factor. 2 for 9 from the field, 7 points, 8 rebounds, turned it over 4 times. Like, they were on him. Like, clearly coming into the game, the idea was to allow Ed Crosswell to do whatever, he could on the scoring side, but lock into Bryce Hopkins, make him take, bad shots, or just straight up deny him the ball, and then force guys like Jared Bynum and Devin Carter into shots that they're not normally used to having to take. And that executed the game plan perfectly. 53 points is all Providence could muster. I thought for sure Providence was going to be looking at a possible Sweet 16 run here. I really, really did. And they just didn't. That roster is very talented they have, but they were overmatched. And Kentucky is not a team that has overmatched very many this year, aside from teams like maybe South Carolina. But even then, they haven't been that dominant group. We saw them just lose to Vanderbilt without Leanne Robbins twice in a week and a half. So it was very impressive that they came together. The nice thing about Kentucky here with Calipari is he's going to run his starters the entire game. So we don't have to worry about, and it sounds like, let me double check here, but it sounds like Severe Wheeler is a no-go. Before earlier today, I double checked this. I'm pretty sure that ankle injury is still flaring up. Of course, I don't have my note anymore, but I don't think he's going to go. So we're looking at a rotation here with, CJ Frederick, Lance Ware, Adu Tirio, and Damian Collins. Like those four are their bench players, but they're not going to play very many minutes at all unless somebody gets into foul trouble or Frederick suddenly starts hitting shots. And I don't think Frederick's going to be hitting shots anytime soon. That he also feels pretty broken to me, and I'm not too sure that he's actually healthy either. So Cason Wallace playing, the entire game. Antonio Reeves playing the entire game. Jacob Toppin playing the entire game. And then you've got Chris Livingston and Oscar Tshiebwe giving you 32 to 35 minutes. And that's where, Collins and Ware will come in and play 3 to 5 minutes. Frederick play 5 minutes. Tierra will play a minute or two just to give Wallace like a 1 second water break. So you're looking at the starting five of Kentucky right there as excellent options against Kansas State, because we know Kansas State doesn't travel well. They did play very well. I had the breakout, possible upset alert there for Montana State. At the very least, I thought they would cover, and they didn't. Shout out to Kansas State for winning, pretty handily there by 12. I needed 8. I needed 9. Marquise Noel was great. Keontae Johnson was good. I mean, they looked really, really good there. There were a couple of spots, though, that just murdered Kansas State. And, going up against that Montana State team, clearly there's a talent gap there, but they do have a player like Raekwon Battle, who was a P5 player coming out of high school with the Huskies, and he scored 27 points. He hit 3 threes, got to the foul line a bunch. He was just a sniper assassin, really, really good against them. Now, what Kansas State did do a good job of was the big man Jabril Bello, from across the pond, Chip Cheerio, how's your mom? Like, that guy. He didn't do so well. He had a bunch of fouls, really struggled. But K-State has been terrible in the front court. Like, as good as Key Johnson has been offensively and has had some blocks and done well on the glass, he's not necessarily a lockdown defender, and their interior defense has been susceptible to big games. They do have Nate Tomlin, who's good on the glass, and they do have Ngossen, who is capable of blocking shots. But overall, this team as a group has not been good on the interior. They did do a good job on getting Bello to the bench, but what happened here was, this is not a fake name, called him Greg. I want to call him Greg. Great Osabar. And a dear friend of the show, Farnicus, had to face a guy yesterday in the Mania tournament that actually played Great Osabar. So must be a man from the future, because as good as Great has been, he doesn't normally put up 40 or 35 to 40, and he did. And he really had an easy time against this Kansas State interior. And I would have thought Bello would have been that guy, but because of the fact that Bello was in foul trouble the entire way, it allowed Osabar to come in there and do some things that he doesn't necessarily do. A lot of easy looks. He shot 5 of 6 from the field, had 11 points, 7 rebounds. He had 3 blocks, 2 steals. Kansas State, when they're driving to the lane there, they've got some undersized guards. Noel is like all of 5'7", 5'8", right? This is a team that gets their shot blocked at a pretty high clip. Desi Sills, another short, guy that likes to drive. Cam Carter, like these guards, they go into the middle. This, I hate to say it, folks, but this sets up as a monster Oscar Tshiebwe spot. And I know there's been only one player in the last probably 5 years that I've adamantly been a fader of as chalk, and it worked a hell of a lot for me, and that's Luka Garza. I should have asked Scott. Scott would have known. But Luka Garza, the fade of that. And Oscar Tshiebwe second on that list. Like, I faded him as chalk a bunch. It has not worked very well sometimes, and it's worked great other times. This season, it worked great until people figured out Oscar wasn't the same, or this Kentucky team, they're not very well coached this year. This group around Oscar's not the same. They're not where they need to be. Fading Oscar just made all that much sense. We're at a place, we're at a point with Oscar now where we can no longer consider fading him. And that goes for me telling you that as somebody who fades Oscar more than the average person. Going up against Providence, he just had 8 real points, but his rebounding was outrageous. He literally was just poor Ed Croswell was just getting whipped around and thrown everywhere. 25 rebounds. Think about how many rebounds that actually is, right? You see a guy like, Joel Soriano, our man from St. John's. Like, he has a good game, controls the glass. You watch it, and you're like, wow, he did pretty good. You look at the box score, 12 to 13 rebounds. Like, damn, he really owned the glass. Good job. You watch my man Isaiah Stewart from the Huskies a couple years ago, controlling the glass. He had 9 or 10 rebounds. Pretty good job. 25 rebounds is like some just straight up playing a video game on easy mode, that's just a ridiculously high number of rebounds. It's really hard to get that many rebounds. Think about it. You got to have the best position at all times. The ball's bouncing off the rim awkwardly sometimes. You have to have knowledge, like Dennis Rodman always used to say, knowledge of angles and where balls are going to bounce off. And he just had whipped the shit out of Ed Crosswell all over the court, threw him around like he was a rag doll. Hopkins, who generally likes to pull that Zach Randolph stuff and miss bunnies so he could, do his stat padding, there was none of that going on. Oscar just made a decision in his mind, and he does this sometimes, that he's going to get every single rebound from his own team at that. And he's primed for another big outing. I think the 25 rebounds might actually be the floor for Oscar in this matchup. I'd say that seriously, actually. He had 50 fantasy points while scoring 8 real points. Think about how difficult that is to do. Juwan Roberts a few weeks ago had 0 real points, put up 30. That's pretty good, but 8 into 50 fantasy points. That is just a ridiculously good number. And there's going to be times where he's getting putbacks and scoring off there. They'll send him to the free throw line. He had no free throws against Providence because he basically wasn't even getting a chance to be fouled because he was just clearing out every rebound. And if they wanted to try to get it from him, they would have gotten an elbow to the chin. And I don't think anybody wants to eat an elbow from Oscar Tshiebwe. There's no amount of money that would get me to do that. And he's going to be able to control this Kansas State group. As good as Great was, I'm going to get some mileage out of that one. Oscar's, a million times better. So he's going to be able to block shots. He's going to get all these rebounds. We're looking for him to score somewhere between 10 to 12 real points. That's all. I think he can obviously score more, and he probably will here. This is the Oscar Tshiebwe game that your grandchildren are going to ask you about. He's going to put up 60 or 70. Now, on the 2 shows ago when I had Mike there the night before round 1, day 1, he was really high. Or I might have been the second day. I can't remember now. They're all running together. He was really high on Edey, right? And obviously Providence lost. He was talking about had that been, had Purdue had a quality backcourt that knew how to just give the ball to an 8-foot monster, how hard could it be? He would have put up the score that Mike really thought he would. And the matchup dictated we were worried about the blowout, right? Like the whole time we were like, oh my God, the blowout, we got to play TJD instead. And it was not a blowout and they lost. But that matchup, that was a great one for Edey to blow the doors off the slate and put up like a 70. And he could have done it. If he had adequate guards, had he been playing with the world-class backcourt from your Washington Huskies, he would have put up 70 and they would have advanced. There's no doubt in my mind. Corin Johnson, Braden Smith. That's your lesson for today. So Oscar, I'm not going to sit here and say that he's going to put up 70. It's on the table. And I'm not just getting like, trying to say something that's a hot take or try to be like, oh my God, I said he'd get 70. You did, guys. Like, I don't really get off on saying that stuff. I much rather like Diaz Graham 3 weeks ago, I would have been happier saying, play this guy and he's going to put up 12 fantasy points in 5 minutes. Like I would have been much happier about that. But I think that Oscar's going to put up a big score here. I don't think Kansas State has the front court to check him. Now they have the bodies to use fouls on him if they want to play the hack-a-shack game and make him earn his shots at the foul line and really rough him up, because eventually if you keep beating on a guy, fouling him, he's going to wear down a little bit. As good as Oscar is and as tough as he is, no one's really going to be able to take a beating that entire time. So they have Ngossen for fouls. They have Tomlin for fouls. Like they've got all these guys they can use. And Keontae Johnson probably will be able to avoid some of that stuff with Oscar because they really need Key's, offensive output. They can't afford for him to be getting down there and fouling out, but they can afford for Tomlin and Ngossen to be getting in foul trouble. And you might even see Bebe, get into the game here to use some of his fouls. Maybe he sees an uptick in minutes, but at 3-2, that might seem like, oh, if he's going to get more minutes, can we play him? No, because he's not going to be out there to do anything besides use his fouls. So I just want to keep that in mind, that there might be a revolving door of bigs trying to slow Oscar down. It might comically be like guys hanging off of his arms like a cartoon or something, but Oscar Tshiebwe is going to have a monster game. Find a way to get him into your lineup. I might as well just put him in the core because I've talked him up so much for the past 18 minutes. He's ridiculously good in this spot. I know it's getting harder to play these guys because the values are getting so despicable and the prices is getting so high on most guys. You want to prioritize Oscar. I know that TJD is on this slate going up against a Miami team and a banged up Norchad that just saw my man from Drake, Darnell Brody, put out a clinic. So TJD technically has a good matchup as well. It's going to be hard to fit both. If I have to choose one, and you're going to have to, I'm taking the $800 discount on Oscar Tshiebwe because I think that his matchup at the end of the day is a little bit easier, a lot a bit easier. And Norchad, was coming back, and he played really well. Norchad's a lot tougher than anything Kansas State's going to throw out there. I do think he can get after TJD a little bit. So with that being said, Oscar Tshiebwe is your number one overall pay up on this slate by a lot. Other guys to look at here, Antonio Reeves. His price had gone up, which made him a little difficult to get to, but now his price has gone down for some reason, which is one of the fewer mistakes that DK's made. They've done a good job on pricing, but pricing Reeves back down to 6'2" from 6'7" is definitely an error. I like him in the spot. He's going to play 38 minutes. He took another 18 shots against Providence. He's taken 17 plus shots in 4 straight games. He's not going to give you a whole lot else, but at the low 6K range, I can live with that because he'll literally score probably 20 to 25 real points. He's going to be the benefactor of a lot of extra possessions with Oscar being such a sick rebounder. They're going to hold Kansas State to a lot of one and done possessions. So Reeves is going to benefit with those extra shots. So he's my number 2 on Kentucky. If you're looking to mini stack this game, or you can't get to Oscar, like you're trying everything, you've got all your other pieces, you can't get there and you need somebody, you want to play Reeves. I love Jacob Toppin for GBP still sitting there at 7-8. He just, he's kind of like DJ Burns in the way that everybody keeps writing him off at these, higher prices, but he keeps performing at a pretty high level. Another 18, 6 and 2 for him in 37 minutes, 30 fantasy points. We're not kicking him out the bedroom at 30 fantasy points at 7-8. So I'm happy with that. He's scored 30 plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5, pretty consistently, 5 of his last 6 actually. And he's playing upwards of 37 minutes in each of those. So Toppin's on the viable playlist as well. You have Cason Wallace out there taking a bunch of shots. He didn't shoot very well, 2 of 11 against Providence, but still eclipsed 23 fantasy points. So that shows you, he's facilitating a lot of the offense. With Wheeler out, he's done better than I expected for him to be the initiator, the play caller, all these, point guard roles that you want to talk about. He's done a really good job in those. And I think Reeves it's smart the way they're doing it, because Reeves is more a off-ball shooter, needs to stay in that role. Frederick, same thing. Adutiero is an interesting prospect, but way too raw to throw out there. So Wallace is going to get all these point guard minutes to himself, and his assist rate has skyrocketed accordingly because of it. Still trying to take his shots because he wants to be involved that way, but he really doesn't need to be. And you see 4 of his last 5, he scored less than 8 points, but he's only been in under 20 fantasy points in 1 of those, which tells you he's leaving his mark in other ways on this team that don't include scoring, especially with the emergence of Reeves. But he is a little bit spendy at 7-7. He does have a relatively high floor, but some of that upside's popped out of there. Unless Reeves goes ice cold, the offense goes stagnant, and they need a bucket, then Wallace will be that guy to take it. And you'll see a little bit more out of him, but he's definitely more of a GPP play here. And then Chris Livingston. Sorry, Chris, everybody hates Chris at this time because Oscar Tshiebwe is going to grab every single rebound. It's not going to leave a lot for you. No offense to you, my friend, but at 6'1", you are a pretty easy fade unless Oscar fouls out. Make sure you put Chris Livingston in something, because I just guaranteed a monster game for him with my talk there. Now, on the Kansas State side, Marquise Noel at 9.2. That's a fine price for him. I think he's pretty much matchup proof against anyone. Oddly enough, had Xavier Wheeler played, I would have been a little bit more leery about using him. Having to be guarded by the Reeves Wallace, duo, and possibly a little bit by Frederick for a few minutes, I think Noel's a great play. Put up 52 against Montana State. Was kicking myself for not getting more of him. Kind of wrote him off a bit at the 9.8 price against Montana State, because I just didn't think he would have to put up a 50, and he did. That he's actually put up 50 in 2 of his last 3. So the 9.2 price is a little advantageous. I feel like this is the worst price slate for DK since the tournament started this week. So, we've had, even counting the NIT slates, like this is definitely the more softer pricing that they've had. So Stars and Scrubs builders will rejoice when they hear that. I think the 8K price for KJ is interesting. He's taking double-digit shots. As long as he doesn't have to be on Oscar too much, competing with him on the glass. I'm fine with him. If he does, I worry about, gassing out, fouls, all of that stuff. I would be worried about. They need to make sure Tomlin and Gosson are taking those blows down low, and trying to preserve TJ as much as they can for the offensive end, because they're going to need it. Cam Carter's okay as a value. Desi Sill's okay as a value. Both guys under, $6K. But really, if you're going to use someone from K-State at this point, and for a while now, it's just made sense to play either Noel or Johnson. And it's definitely in play to play Johnson at 8K because it's a reasonable price for him. All right, moving right along here. Jody got sucked into a conversation with Johnny. Good luck with that, my friend. All right, let's move along here because I don't want to get sucked in that either. Moving on to the next game, Michigan State versus Marquette. This is my favorite game of the day from a real-life perspective. I have Sparty going to the Final Four. You guys know that from me talking about it here the last few days. This Marquette team is – it's funny because both of them are really susceptible on the inside, but Marquette's interior, they get beat up on a lot. But we know so does the Spartans. Spartans front court, something about Michigan State. In college football 2 years ago, you could target their secondary with all the receivers in the world. They'd all have like 300-yard games. This year, you target centers and power forwards and front court players against Michigan State. They just absolutely detonate. Now, I wasn't worried. The reason I like Spartans in their draw is because I wasn't really worried about anyone on USC's front court being able to do damage against the Spartans. And it was a pretty close game throughout, but it never seemed like the Spartans were in any danger of actually losing in the second half. And they won by 10. It really wasn't that big a deal. Josh Morgan had 14 and 5. He actually got off to a quick start, had like 8 or 9 points right away, but then he went cold after. And I told you guys, yeah, Josh Morgan's technically the big to take this matchup, but it's Josh Morgan. And Josh Morgan did Josh Morgan things, which shout out to Rothstein. That's not a good thing in this regard. In that game, though, Joey Hauser looked good, as he has usually done. Jaden Akins hit some big shots. Tyson Walker, did some things. But statistically, it was just a grinder of a game. Michigan State really just grinded that one out. And nobody really did a huge amount of fantasy point scoring. Even with Hauser putting up 17 and 8, it wasn't as if he broke the slate or anything, or even really got value. He got close, right? So it does give me pause to target the Spartans, but this matchup is much better for them than it was against USC. If anything, your kind of semi-value main team play here is going to be Jaden Akins at 5.2. We've gone back and forth with him throughout the season, right? He's been a sub 5K value for us. His price has risen to 6K. Now he's back down in that low 5.2. He has scored 22 plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5. Scoring reliant, but we have seen him rebound a little bit. He has 13 rebounds in his last 3 games, so that's adding a little bit more to his game. And I think he's just a safer option here against Marquette, because the Marquette defense is extremely susceptible for secondary players and bigs to do damage. So they're going to throw, their best defenders at Tyson Walker and AJ Hoggard, right? Like, that's not I'm not saying anything crazy, right? The fact of the matter is, though, I still like Hoggard for a big game, which we'll get into it for a second. So Akins is going to see the weaker side of the defenders and the wings, basically. So that could be part of the time. Joplin, Prosper will be out there sometimes. Like, this is just a good spot for Akins overall. Upside, seemingly lacking at times, but I definitely, as long as shots falling, fail to see how he won't make a 20, fantasy point floor here with more. So I like Akins. The bigs to take advantage of the Marquette front court is Malik Hall at 5'1", Matty Sissoko at 4'2". Neither one of and I could feel the collective cringe throughout. Like, it's really difficult to want to use any of them. I could get behind Malik Hall potentially at 5'1". Played 28 solid minutes against Michigan State, 6 points, 4 rebounds, 2 steals, a block, and assist. Just kind of filled it up there, right? His shot attempts have actually been a little bit higher than I realized. And I've been watching the last probably 6 Spartans games. He's taken a fair amount of shots that I wasn't expecting, and he's taken a bunch of threes too. So that versatility also gives opposing bigs trouble at times. Oso Ighodaro is somebody who is versatile in that regard too. So it's really kind of, they're mirroring each other with the way that their bigs like to operate. And neither one of them is really going to be able to take advantage of that spot. But I do think Malik Hall would be the guy to do so, and see him put up something like 20 to 25 fantasy point score. Sissoko, more of the traditional, back to the basket guy. He's only 4.2. He's a little bit interesting because we know he's going to play 20 plus minutes as well. They're pretty much an even split at the position. So I don't mind going to Sissoko here in this matchup, but just be prepared to get like 10 to 12 fantasy points, and you'll have to be happy with that. Like, you're getting 3x at 4.2, not the end of the world, but you're also not crushing it at that price, right? So you just have to have realistic expectations. Give me a second here, guys. I need to pull up some DK stuff before it goes away. I just want to check one thing here. I want to see if we ended up profitable tonight, despite having Demoy Hodge in main. I suspect no, but I just want to double check here. Jenner takes down the 222. See, 232 took down the 222 tonight. That just shows you how, nope, my main lineup sucked. Damn. Hodge was a killer, man, 13%. I thought Disu was 8 in the 222. You have to admire that one more time. But yeah, definitely a right because of Hodge. That's a bummer. All right, let's get back into it. My laptop fan is broken, so my laptop is like heating up, and I think it's actually causing some issues. So if I suddenly disappear, that's the reason why. All right, let's get my page pulled back up here. Some good conversations going on in the YouTube chat there. Love it. I appreciate you being here, Johnny. And like I said, you guys hitting the like button, chatting. It helps us within the YouTube algorithm when people type CBB, DFS, any of that stuff. Our show pops up, and I appreciate your guys' continued support with that. Gotta find what I'm looking for. All right, whatever. On the Marquette side, the Oso Ighodaro experiment at 7.3 is at least interesting, especially if Kolik's like super limited. I think we might see Oso get a bunch of more shots here. At 35 minutes at 7.3, I think he's definitely in the player pool. You saw against Xavier, he put up 2 real points, but still eclipsed 23 fantasy points. So it shows you how high of a floor he has. Big upside, has a little bit of a strong passing game. His assist rate has gone up in conference play. He had 5 assists against Vermont there, 7 against St. John's, 5 against St. John's, 3 against Xavier. So that aspect of his game, playing a little bit of that quarterback role as a big. He's got the versatility to hit jumpers. I actually do really like him here because of that, but he's just not going to be the guy that takes advantage of Michigan State like how we normally see. He's going to have to do it in the ways that work for him. And I think he is a bad matchup for them overall, especially if Sissoko ends up having to guard him. But it'll be a situation where Oso is going to have to be hitting his jumpers and getting good looks, not necessarily banging down low, because that's just not his game. So I do like him. Reasonable price if you build a more of a balanced build. The decision here is going to be if Kolik is limited / even out, which I would be very surprised. Cam Jones at 6'5" becomes a very popular play, probably already is a popular play, and he becomes a strong play in all formats. Now, using him in a main build is very risky, and this is one I might back off of slightly, but he's just so cheap at 6'5", taking a ton of shots. He got off to a slow start there against Vermont, but in the second half, he had a stretch where I think he scored like 14 straight, right? And he just went nuts. Ended with 30. They drop him 1K. It's a very puzzling price drop. Now, the Michigan State defense on the perimeter could definitely give him problems. So I don't think this is a lock button play like some are going to be saying. It's still Cam Jones. There's still a lot of risk there. There is still a overall lack of peripherals normally. And he's going to have to be knocking down, 40% to 50% of his shots to really get there normally, even at the 6'5" price. So keep that in mind before you lock him into like 90% of your builds. But I acknowledge he is a strong play, and he's absolutely in our player pool. Other guys to look at here typically are, Prosper, but I haven't rostered Prosper in like 2 years. And he went through this spell where he was super chalk, like 5 or 6 slates in a row, kind of had the Jermaine Cuisinart treatment. He was chalk and he would bust. people are too smart for that now, and his price just never drops. So you can pretty safely avoid him, I think. Instead, if you want to avoid paying for Iguodala or Cam Jones, or you're running some GPP lineups, the high usage, high shot rate David Joplin at 5K is always intriguing to me. I wish he would play more minutes, but he can get hot. You have Stevie Mitchell down there at 4-2 playing starters minutes. And then you have Ben Gold, Sean Jones, Chase Ross, who minutes-wise, there's no predictability there, but there are games where Sean Jones plays a lot because of foul trouble, or he comes out and they're doing a hot hand situation. And same with Chase Ross. If he's playing well defensively, hitting shots on offense, then he sees a minute spike. So it's mainly like a hot hand type of thing. It's almost sort of like the Alabama value in that way. You're just not going to see these guys on a regular basis. You have to tread kind of lightly with them. Stevie Mitchell makes the most sense if you're going with a non-pay up on this team because of the fact that he's only 4-2 and he does play starters minutes. But we have seen those get cut into slightly, and he's the one that's the main victim when Chase Ross and Sean Jones do well. It's at the expense of Stevie Mitchell. So there is some possibility and for him to lose some time. And also, like I said, the matchup isn't that great for guards against Michigan State anyways. They're going to force a lot of turnovers. They're going to cause chaos. I just worry, and especially like say Tyler Kolek is going to miss, which there's no chance of that happening. Like he's not going to sit out. It's a thumb. It was enough to cause him to shoot 3 for 11 again, or there's no zip on his passes. Like we're going to have to see these other guys step up. Mitchell is at least interesting for that regard, but also if Kolek can't play it to his normal amount or his full capacity, that's going to allow some of the better defenders to go to the other guys. And Stevie Mitchell with, Hoggard on him is just, he won't even get a shot off. So be a little bit careful with how you approach this. I drafted Tyler Kolek in 3 different drafts, by the way, even though I thought Marquette was going to lose. And I'm starting to feel like it's a conspiracy after that first game because I didn't get value out of him in my first round pick. But I'm definitely cheering for Tyler Kolek to have a big game here for that, but not too big that he breaks the DFS slate. I'm in that weird position. Those of you who are in like 1,800 fantasy site or fantasy leagues in NFL know that, where you're like, my guy scored a touchdown. Oh, but he also beat me. Like kind of like that. All right, next game on the slate, St. Mary's versus UConn. This is a definitive defensive struggle, rock fight extraordinaire. It's just a really tough environment to be in. And it would have been even if VCU won their game against St. Mary's instead. VCU just was outclassed in that one. Very impressive win for St. Mary's. They're a very strong team, very well coached. Don't make a lot of mistakes. UConn's definitely going to have to be on their A game here. Ken Palm has it 66-63, by the way, so lower scoring game, close. We're going to see some UConn guys come up here on the old Walter Waddell optimizer because there are some cheap prices across the board for everyone. It's not a great matchup. It's going to test our will. And I think it won't test. It probably won't be that much of a test for people who are, running their projections, and they're going to see that, the UConn St. Mary's matchups just bad pace wise, all that, and guys are just not going to come up. But for me, I see a price drop on that, like to Jordan Hawkins, Andre Jackson. These prices suck me in, and I don't know if I have the discipline to stay away. And Jordan Hawkins has been extremely bad lately. And Tristan Newton's really cheap too. Like these UConn prices are wild. I don't know how you don't have at least one UConn piece in your lineup. And I admit and say that it's probably not a great idea because of how good St. Mary's defense is and how this matchup kind of goes up, and it's going to be sets up to be more of a violent affair. Maybe the big men is where you really want to look to, but I'm never playing Sanogo. I'm team no Sanogo all the way. I know he went nuts in that last game, but no. It's Tristan Newton at 5'7", Jordan Hawkins at 6'3", Andre Jackson at 6'1". My man Caravan, who I'm usually talking about, is priced at 6K, which you couldn't use him. You normally can't use Caravan until next year, but you certainly couldn't use him here when you have Jackson 100 more, Hawkins 300 more, and Tristan Newton 300 less. Like, what did DK do here with this pricing? So I'm feeling kind of bad about it because I normally wouldn't even look at this matchup in a main lineup, but how do we not at least consider Tristan Newton at 5'7"? He had an 18 against Iona. He's going to play 30 plus minutes. Still had 6 assists, 4 rebounds. He is a big time threat for a triple double normally any matchup because of his contributions in all categories, but in 5'7" just feels way too cheap. It's a gift. It really is a gift. It's sort of like the price on Triple J today at 5'9", who I didn't end up getting in as many lineups as I probably should have. It's like that. It's just a very good spot because of his price, but a horrible matchup. So it's one of those. So I'm really interested to see where ownership goes on that. Some people say that matchups don't matter. I'm not in the crowd of matchups not mattering. Obviously, thinking college basketball matchups matter more than any other sport most of the time. And this is one that makes me kind of shy away. But I think volume comes into play with a price like this. Tristan Newton at 5'7" has to be considered. I am trying to be disciplined enough to not throw Jordan Hawkins into a main lineup. I think he has the chance to do really well here. At 6'3", he's been priced up over 8K for a lot of this season. He has definitely taken a back seat. As the season went on, he became the alpha. He took a ton of shots. And then the last month or so of the season, he's really taken a back seat. We've seen Jackson start to play well again. We've seen Sanogo really start to assert himself as the alpha. They went away from him for a while. He's played really well, I admit, as a Sanogo, disliker. I definitely admit how well he's been playing. But Hawkins at 6'3" it's really advantageous. And the St. Mary's backcourt, which has Logan Johnson, who's tough as nails, yes. A veteran, yes. They have 3 seniors in the starting 5, and Mitchell Saxon, who might as well be a senior. He's a COVID senior. All of those guys are well-versed. They're not going to melt in an environment like this. They're used to playing Gonzaga in the WCC tournament. They're used to being in the tournament in general. But there's one glaring issue in this starting 5 that gets rotational minutes, and he looked really, really shaky in that first game. And I'm, of course, talking about the freshman Aiden Mahaney. Mahaney is a dead-eye shooter. They need his offense. If they're going to have any chance of advancing here, they need him to play well. He got into major foul trouble, which is pretty uncharacteristic for Aiden Mahaney normally. He has a foul rate under 3. It rarely ever comes up. 2 of his last 3 games, he's had 4 fouls, coincidentally, but it rarely ever comes up. However, against VCU, he played only 18 minutes because of those fouls. He took 5 shots. Normally, you see him take double-digit shots. He had 2 assists and nothing else. Missed all 5 of those shots. This is a guy that has a 30% shot rate, a 24% usage rate. He shoots 41% from long range, which was 14th in the WCC conference and top 200 overall. This is a guy who looked extremely comfortable throughout the season and probably played over his head a little bit. And now after seeing him really shaky and just kind of like melt, and not in a good way, not melt the slate, but melt away from the ball, it makes me wonder, is this going to be too big for him again? He's, goes from the VCU defense, which is good, to the UConn defense, which is great. And that's just a really tough situation to ask of the freshman. They have Logan Johnson, who's a capable scorer. He can shoot, he can drive. He's not necessarily known for his, long range shooting. He's a low 30 shooter, but he can do it if it comes down to it. Very good, in the fast break, very good, turning, turnovers into points. That's where Logan's at his best, but they're going to need, at the end of the day, they need Aiden. Like they have built so much of this team this season, their strategy around his shooting. They simply can't rely on if Aiden has to go to the bench and they've got to put in Sarunas, his kid, Augustus Marshallonis, the former Sonic Sarunas. That's not a good situation. I know he looked actually pretty decent. He had scored 13 points, but he got to the foul line a bunch in that game against VCU, and that's just basically where he racked up most of his stats. It wasn't as if he came out and was knocking down a bunch of threes or something. They need Aiden, and I don't know that he's going to be able to perform against these UConn guys. After seeing what VCU did to him, how does Hurley, the good Hurley, not exploit that? And it might be worth fouling the kid, honestly, like the first couple of possessions, like being really physical with him. And if you have to burn a foul to do it, not hurt him, not get a flagrant or anything like that, but you know what I mean? Just like body him and really rattle him. That might be the way to go. And I suspect we may see that here with Connecticut. So this is a game I like Connecticut to win. I don't see either Aiden or Logan Johnson handling this backcourt. I think people have forgot how good this backcourt can be. This UConn team reminds me so much of the Shabazz Napier UConn, the Kemba Walker UConn. They come into the tournament, they're good, but people kind of overlook them, forget about them, and then one of those guards just off to the races, smokes it. We didn't see that against Iona. We saw Sonogo take over, but they had a decided matchup advantage in the post, and we saw my man Donovan Clingan put up like 25 fantasy points in 12 minutes. This is a matchup where they're going to need the guards. St. Mary's has a front court that can give Sonogo a heartache. There's going to be some foul issues there for the front court. It's going to be a game that, as physical as I expect it to be, ultimately will be determined by the guards. And that means one of Newton, Hawkins, or Jackson are going to explode here. One's going to have a good game, and one's probably going to be a little bit passive. Now, is there a pterodactyl in here? All right. I have a feeling my youngest daughter's going to pop out any minute, so be ready for that, guys. All right. I feel like Hawkins is going to be the one to go off here. I think the public's going to be all over Newton because of the cheap price. They're both relatively cheap, but you save a little bit more with Newton. Newton has the better assist rate. He draws a little bit more fouls. His shot rate's way lower, though. Usage rates are pretty similar, but where Hawkins comes into play is the fact that he has a near 30% shot rate. He's shooting 37% from long range. He's taken a backseat to everyone else lately. I don't see him doing that here in this one. And this is going to be one of those. This is going to be one of those. Pretty sure my daughter just said and one. Sir, you watching CBI back there or what? I don't know what's going on in this house. But this is going to be one of those Disu calls for me. Like Hawkins is going to be 8% owned on this 8-game slate. And I feel like he's got a chance to break out. Now, Demoy Hodge is also somebody that I thought was going to have a breakout game at lower ownership and didn't. So keep that in mind. But I don't expect Hawkins to also get blasted to the floor either. So look for him to have a breakout game here. That's kind of the line in the sand that I'm drawing here. And we've got games to back up that thought, against Providence, a strong 20 real point performance, 6 rebounds. He shot 18 times in that one. Look back to his game against St. John's, 20 real, 5 rebounds, shot 17 times in that one. Seton Hall, 20 points, shot 7 of 18 in that one, put up 20 points against Marquette. This is a guy that's typically putting up 20 points. He's only 3 games removed from doing so against Villanova back on March 4th, where he scored 24, 4 rebounds, assist, a steal, 3 of 11 from downtown, but he did get to the foul line a lot in that game, 7 of 8. And he took overall, he made 7 shots on 17 attempts. So that is what I expect from Hawkins, and I'm looking for him to come back and do that. I really feel like last game was a little bit more of an anomaly because they had such a big advantage. Even with Iona having a great post player, Nelly Jr. Joseph, he's not a big guy. He's not a tall guy, right? He's just he knows how to use his body, and he's very skilled. But he was not any match for that size of UConn. So they exploited it. Marquette, same kind of thing. They exploit Marquette's front court with their size. They didn't win that game in the Big East tournament, but that's what they tried to do. Hawkins has taken a backseat in back-to-back games. I don't think people are going to realize that. They're going to look at it, and they're going to think Hawkins isn't part of the plan anymore. He's just going to be standing in the corner with his hands on his knees, a la Demoy Hodge today. But that's not necessarily what's going to happen. I believe he's looking, and he's going to be hunting shots. He's going to get back on track, and I think that they're at their best when Hawkins plays that way. So as long as Hurley gives him the green light, I think we see a Hawkins 18 to 20 shot game at low ownership, direct leverage off of Tristan Newton. And I think that Tristan Newton's a little bit more risky than Hawkins at times. You may look at the last month and see that Newton's been more steady. But overall this season, Newton's definitely been the one that's seen, more spikes and drops and spikes and drops. And Hawkins there for a while was just 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30. So that's my pick there in Jordan Hawkins. I'm typically pretty strong with these plays, but obviously something can go wrong in the tournament. I'm not bestowing upon him the Posh Play of the Day label. It is certainly in play. Him and Jamarius Burton are definitely vying for it. I am not there yet with either. I may be in the next 45 minutes. We'll see. Andre Jackson has probably gone from the riskiest of the trio to now the safest, oddly enough. When his price is below a certain threshold around 6'4", 6'5", I really start to like him. He's one of those, Mike guys. He's just putting up stats in all categories. He can score with the best of them. He just doesn't have to because all these other gifted scorers around him. He's perfectly fine to put up a 6 rebound, 8 assists, 2 steal, 1 block game, score 6 points, and bam, he's put up 30. So I really like him. He's definitely in play in all formats. You may hear a lot of people say, well, he's a GPP play only. If you want to get there, you're not comfortable with Hawkins, which I understand. Jackson is a very good replacement in the lineup and somebody that you want to use. I think you want to use somebody at UConn. I know the matchup's weird, the environment's weird, but these prices just really dictate having to play somebody from UConn. And it's going to be one of Hawkins, Jackson, or Newton, and I might just kind of rotate them around in various lineups to get that exposure. And they threw Donovan Kling at us at 4.8. He is a very high fantasy point per minute performer. This is likely not the matchup to use him even at 4.8, but if you're running multiple lineups and you have a throwaway GPP, throw him out there because at 4.8, he could easily put up 20 in 10 minutes if things break right. But he's likely going to just end up using his physicality. It's going to get him into trouble against that St. Mary's front court, and there's probably fouls waiting to happen. So just be careful if you go that route. All right, moving right along here. San Jose State first half open C by C. Man, I told you, Coach Miles, you bet the CBI. I think my daughter's watching the St. Tim Miles game back there in her bedroom, talking about N1. I don't know what she's watching back there. Creighton versus Baylor. I think I am way heavy on one side compared to the rest of the world, and go figure, I'm on the other side of a contrarian spot. That's never happens, but I'm pretty heavy on Baylor here. I know the world loves Creighton and has thought they were a Final Four team since last summer when they added Baylor Shireman. The Creighton guys are certainly advantageous for DFS purposes. We know that. I can rehash everything I always say about them, but at this point, you guys could probably say it yourself. They are running that short rotation. Typically, the prices put them right where they should be. Like this time, it's Arthur Kaluma and Baylor Shireman. Like they're priced pretty much spot on, maybe even a little bit too high. So neither of them really come into play for me. Trey Alexander at 6'4" is very, very advantageous. When I saw that price, I immediately thought, as much as I like Baylor in this spot, I don't know how we don't use Trey Alexander at 6'4". That's about 700 too cheap for him. So we're looking at a spot against a Baylor defense that can be hit or miss. I feel like we're going to have that Baylor shutdown, defensive masterpiece performance that we just haven't seen in a while, but we saw it the season that they made their tournament title run. I think this could be one of those games where they just lock in defensively, but that price on Trey Alexander at 6'4" is just it's kind of similar to the UConn guys. It's just too cheap to walk away from. Because Creighton's they're not using their bench. They don't even have a bench. Farabello and Frederick King are their bench guys, and neither can handle very big minutes, although Frederick King week during the mid part of the season was nice. He's just not there yet developmental-wise. So Kalkbrenner, Kaluma, Sherman, Nemhart, and Alexander are going to play all the minutes they can handle continually. Kalkbrenner was the one that just absolutely destroyed. What happened against NC State was DJ Burns got himself into foul trouble. Once that happened, Kalkbrenner was unchecked in the middle, and he was just getting put back and bunny shot after bunny shot, and all the way to 31 real points, 48 fantasy. People will likely chase that. I do not love the Kalkbrenner play in this instance. I think that Baylor has a front court that will get physical with Kalkbrenner. I think he's one of those guys, he's not Drew Timme level, like timid against violent play, but he's definitely not, for his size, you'd think he'd bang more. He's not that guy that is going to get up in you and push you around and get these blocks. Like he's going to get those weak side blocks. He's going to do some things down there, and he's going to rebound decently. But how often do you see Kalkbrenner? And his props are always cheap on the rebounding side, like 6.5 and 7.5 rebounds. Why do you think that is? Because he's not this aggressive on the boards as Oscar and some of these other guys, and that's why his props hit that 6.5 and 7.5 mark. And I've made some money going on the overs. When you look at him generally, his rebounding totals, they're not that good. He averages 6 rebounds per game, but the last 5 games, he's only hit that mark once, and that was against NC State when he had 7. And that's only because DJ Burns couldn't stop fouling. The front court of NC State the rest of the way without Gant was just a bunch of young guys, and they folded under the pressure, and Kalkbrenner ran unchecked. And even then, it was still 7 rebounds. He put up 31 points. Like he should have had 10-plus rebounds pretty easily there, and he didn't. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Kaluma was aggressive under there. Baylor Shireman, we know Baylor grabs Baylor versus Baylor, by the way, narrative time. He grabs a ton of rebounds. He has a high rebounding rate. So a lot of that hurts Kalkbrenner in the end. and hurts his overall upside because the rebounds go to Baylor and Kaluma. But I don't foresee any of them getting in there, especially if we get one of those vintage everyday John performances where he's able to stay on the floor for 20 to 25 minutes and really, really get aggressive and dictate the style of play down there. That could be a big time problem for Creighton. Flo Thamba, same thing. They need him out there for his defensive prowess. I know Thamba was really popular yesterday, which was kind of weird. He played 10 minutes. That was a slate that everyone was desperate for value, so I guess I get it. But he's not necessarily a play for DFS, but I'm just talking about him affecting the game negatively for that Creighton front court. Baylor, I may be too high on them, but I feel like this team plays a style at the absolute height of their ability. They win this game. Creighton is not as physical. I don't think they handled that physical pressure as well if it does happen. Now, if Baylor comes out and, Flagler misses a couple shots, Key George is fouling or not engaged, and they're just kind of there to be there, then it's going to be a problem. Creighton's going to run away with it. But I don't see a Coach Drew team not being motivated here. And I think we see a semi-run out of Baylor. I ultimately think that they win this game. And I think for DFS purposes, I am looking to some of these Baylor guys against Creighton because Creighton, as good as they've been, they have a fantasy-friendly group. Key George is down to 5.9K compared to Flagler at 8.1. But also I still think Flagler's in play because the 8.1 for him, yeah, it's high, but GPP-wise, he could put up a big score, especially if he gets hot. We've been seeing him score an awful lot of points lately because of Key George struggles. He doesn't do a lot else, and that's kind of hurting his overall upside. But I do think Flagler has a 40 looming in him somewhere. He might unleash it here. But main team lineup, Key George at 5.9, I know he's been pretty rough lately. Put up sub 1 point against Texas, 10 against Iowa State, 23 against Iowa State, and then 15 against UCSB because he got some really foul trouble. Never really got into his rhythm. Shot 2 of 9, 1 of 7 from downtown. But playing Creighton is a little bit different than playing a Texas or Iowa State defense. So Trey Alexander and Key George are both price plays for me. I don't particularly like the way either plays on a regular basis, but I am letting price dictate that for me. And I want to make that distinction that it's not ownership dictating that for me because I will never play somebody because they're going to be highly owned. Sometimes I'm an idiot for that and I lose, but a lot of times it's a good spot to fade because that player that's highly owned, sometimes they're not good. Sometimes they're not in a great matchup, or sometimes they're just not a good player. Like if you tell me Flo Thamba is going to be 35% owned on a 16-game slate, I'm going to look at you like you're speaking some sort of foreign, alien language to me because I'm just not going to understand why we're doing that. And I get that he's cheap, but there were other values that you could do in any number of other value plays that could put up almost the exact same score for Flo and possibly even put up a higher number. So that to me, certain spots like that just don't make sense. So I want to make that clear. I expect Trey Alexander and Key George to be highly, highly owned, but I'm not playing them because they're highly owned. I'm playing them because their prices are silly and they're going to play a lot of this game and they shouldn't have to do a whole lot to eclipse 4X, and there's upside for much more. And we were using Key George at 7 and 8K. We've had Trey Alexander at 7K. These prices are just comically low. This is the Triple J spot for Key George at that price. It's just way too low, and some of those UConn guards. So it's shaping up to be a little bit more balanced for me. I know I said I wanted Oscar, and I will find a way to get him. Trust me, I will. If I'm playing Oscar, you guys need to. But there's a lot of the semi-balance that I usually talk about where I'm going to get Oscar, then I'm going to get some value, and then I'm going to try and fit those 5 to 7K guys into my build. I'm not just going to go Oscar, TJD, and True Timmy, and then a bunch of scrubs. Like, I'm not going to do that. That doesn't make any sense to me. I think that is actually a horrible way to build on this particular slate. And I know that way of building has made people money. And I know it's been strong this year because the pricing's been semi-broken, but we are seeing tighter pricing, and it people are getting burned for doing it. So just tread lightly if you're going to do that. Do the semi-balanced thing instead. Play one of those 3, then fill your lineup up with guys like Key George, Trey Alexander, Jordan Hawkins, Tristan Newton. That's a strong-ass lineup. That's a strong-ass offer for a strong-ass lineup. So that's kind of where my head's at. Moving on here, we have Fairleigh Dickinson. You're a liar if you told me that you thought they were going to advance. Everybody had Purdue losing early anyways, but a lot of people thought they'd lose to Memphis. So everybody was expecting this Purdue-Memphis game where Memphis put on a classic. And instead, we're getting Fairleigh Dickinson versus Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic got a little bit of help from the refs. Say what you will about the timeout. They had possession. They didn't, whatever. To me, Kendrick Davis going down with an injury was obviously the turning point of that one. Allowed FAU to do some serious damage there and turn the whole complexity, the whole trajectory, the momentum, everything switched from Memphis to FAU there. I was talking about this morning. I wasn't on Randall Shaw, I was just in the chat, and he countered with, well, DeAndre Williams played with 4 fouls like for most of the second half. Maybe they got a little bit of lucky there, but Kendrick Davis plays that game. They're at home right now, and I don't know that anyone could actually argue that, to be honest with you. But sometimes making a run in the tournament, it requires a little bit of luck, and that might have been theirs. Now they get to face the 16 seed that just handled and just proved in March Madness and tournament format, you got to have guards. You got to have guards who aren't afraid to shoot. You got to have guards who can make decisions. And you got to have you got to have a veteran guard. Even if that veteran guard doesn't play all that often, you got to have a veteran guard that can step into a game when everybody's, there's nerves, everybody's on edge. You need to make a play. You need that guy to step in and help you with that. And they just didn't have that. And FDU, who is a real bad team. Let's be honest. They're not a very good team. And they didn't even win their conference tournament. Merrimack should be the team that's here. Merrimack probably would have beat Purdue by 30. I'm not joking. Go back and watch some Merrimack games this year. Tell me that team doesn't beat Purdue by 30. So they didn't get embarrassed further. They're lucky. But FDU, I think the party stops here for them. I know I'm not telling you anything super intense here. I think FAU is obviously the right side. As far as DFS purposes go, it's the only guy I ever referenced for FDU these last, this is now the third slate they've been on, is Joe Munden. I think, Ansley, Almanor, and Grant Singleton, Demetria Roberts, the more known quantities are all fine for GPP purposes, but Munden is the guy that I want to use here. He's only 4-4. The FAU defense is definitely a lot better than people maybe realize. So I don't want to get too crazy here, but he does offer us that 4-4 salary savings. He will play roughly 20 to 25 minutes. Against Texas Southern, he was real good, 17-4, 3 steals, 4 of 8 from the field. Against Purdue, he played 20 minutes, 7 points, had some fouls, which took some of his minutes away, a steal, 3 rebounds. Wasn't great there, but that caused his price to go down at 4-4. He's typically going to play mid-20s minutes. I'm not expecting more. I'm not expecting less. I'm putting him right around 24 to 25 minutes, and I think that's perfectly fine for me at 4-4. With his, his rates compared to his teammates, that's just right in the realm of putting up a 4.5 to 5x number at best, and at worst about a 3 to 3.5x. So I'm thinking that Munden's floor is going to be good. His usage rate is 23%. His shot rate is 24%. He does have a defensive rebounding rate of 21%. He's pretty small guy, 6'3", like 180. He's out there, grabbing rebounds, doing his thing. He's got a higher defensive rebounding rate than a lot of teams' big men. He also has a steal rate over 2%, making about 34% of his triples, and he does have a fouls drawn rate of 4.5. So I am a fan of Munden here. I think he definitely can perform. The sexier options, Demetri Roberts, like he's good for GPPs. He'll, if they were to win, it's probably going to be on the back of him, or we might see a good game from Grant Singleton, or Almanor is going to, suddenly dominate, who has a pretty high shot rate himself, 26%, shooting 38% from long range. Like all those guys are fine, but they're just those GPP sprinkles. Munden is a bona fide main team play at his price of 4-4. So that's where I'm at with this FDU team. All right, for FAU, they run that deep rotation. It continues to be a problem. It makes using them for your main lineups difficult. It's fine to go there for GPPs because you can just rotate through and sprinkle your exposure out. Typically, the guys, if you do want to look this way, it's either John L. Davis or Elijah Martin. Those are the two that you typically would look at. But I don't know that they're definitely not priority plays. At least Davis isn't at 7-1. I do think Elijah Martin at 6'7" is interesting, and I am leaning that direction. just because this is a matchup with FDU's, their bottom tier defense. They're, nearly last in all of college basketball from a defensive efficiency standpoint. There's going to be an opportunity here for a very confident FAU team to put up some points. I just hate the fact that there's so much cannibalization throughout their lineup with guys rotating in and out. Had Martin or Davis been somebody that we could sit here and say they're playing 37 minutes, I think you probably end up playing both of them. Because they have solid enough rates in this matchup, they'd probably be coasting into like 40 fantasy point games. They're that good here in this spot. This is a team that is 32-3. I got on Charleston about being the worst 3-loss team in the world, which they are, and they were. This is a good 3-loss team. Davis, 25% shot rate, 25% usage rate, shooting 40% from long range, 3.5% steal rate, 17.5% defensive rebounding rate, draws about 4.5 fouls per 40. He's the guy that I normally like when FAU's around or when I'm watching this team. He's the guy that's impacting it the most. But I do, like I said, feel like the discount, even though it's only a few hundred, pushes me more towards Elijah Martin for my FAU exposure. He does have a 24.5% usage rate, 26% shot rate. He does shoot 38% from long range, so pretty similar numbers across the board to John L. Davis. He's drawing 4 fouls per 40 as well. Martin, looked pretty decent the game against UAB, put up 30 real points, got really hot, had 11 rebounds, 3 steals, like absolute best case scenario there, and that was in 28 minutes. Played 34 against Memphis, had a little bit more difficulties, did shoot the ball 13 times, but those shots weren't falling as much. It didn't contribute quite as much as you would have liked. I would hope that maybe pushes some people off, but I think when it comes down to when people are putting in the prices and doing their projection stuff, I think that these FAU guys are going to look good because of that FDU, their poor defensive rates. So a guy like Martin looks good here, even though the minutes, are going to be, the minutes range is going to be literally from 24 up to 35. So that's a wide range of actual minutes, and any number of outcomes, and performances come from that. 35 minutes, he explodes the slate. 24 minutes, he probably gets 3x. So there's a little room for risk here, but I think the matchup just dictates that FAU should be fine here. And Martin, who has a recent game in which he destroyed, doesn't normally perform like that on a regular basis. He's typically going to be in that mid-20s, but I am giving him some little extra credit here for that matchup. And these are guards who can take advantage of that and won't fold. They're much better than the Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer combination there, or David Jenkins, those guys. Like, this FAU backcourt's the real deal, honestly. Nick Boyd hit the game-winning shot there against Memphis, so he's, got a little bit of the attention, but at 5'4", he's not really in play because of, again, the cannibalization of minutes. It's hard to get there. Same with Greenlee, Rosado, Jalen Gaffney, who is a former UConn transfer, is at 3.7, so he's nice and cheap, but his fantasy point per minute number is low, and he's got very low rates across the board, so it's really hard to trust any of those guys whatsoever. I think you fall on one of Martin or Davis. You do have another option if you wish to take it, which isn't great, but it's also not horrible. Vladislav Golden, who has pretty strong rates, 23.5% shot rate, 23.5% usage rate, 21% shot rate, an offensive rebounding rate that's top 50 in the country, 13.2%, 22.2% defensive rebounding rate, and a block rate of almost 7%. Now, he has a fouls called rate of 5, so that's why Golden is risky. He's 7.2. He's like an Edie. This is coming in. We got Purdue part 2 for this FDU squad because they've got a tall man here, but better guards, so it's a little bit more of a difficult situation. But he does draw 5.5 fouls per 40, so that is a bonus for Golden. He makes sense to me. I think he can absolutely do well against FDU for the same reasons that we thought Edie would do well. Size disparity, 7'1", 7'2" for Golden. We know that the FDU guys, we went into this in detail on the show the other night, Mike and myself, that the average height for FDU is like 6'4", 6'5". The kid that they play at center, Ansley Almanor, is 6'6". They sometimes even use Joe Munden, my guy, Joe Munden, as a small ball 4. He's 6'3", 180. That's a problem. So Golden is going to have the opportunity to absolutely do some damage. But gets a little excited sometimes with his fouls. And minutes they're not going to be there. I don't know if it's a conditioning thing. I haven't watched enough FAU games to tell you one way or another with that. I've only probably seen like 2 during the regular season and then their last 2 that they've played. And when he's out there, he's doing a lot. He's very, very active. So the 5.8 price puts him right in the cusp of main team viability. Had he been below 5.5, I think I would swing the pendulum that way, but he's just a little bit priced up for his minutes to where I think he could still do damage to your lineup, but he could absolutely pay off those who have a high risk tolerance. All right, so we'll move on to the latter half of the slate here. Last two games, actually, we're cruising right along. He's a bulky Russian. Yeah, well said. Well said. Miami versus Indiana. So this is a matchup where TJD, based off of what we saw against Drake, TJD should have another monster performance. He, the globe, seemingly everyone on the planet was picking Kent State at by the time that game, tipped off, everybody was on Kent State. My main thing for that game was, how do they stop TJD? Their front court defense is very poor. They got just assimilated into a nothingness, pit of nothingness against Enrique Freeman. He just put up 20 and 12 against him in 3 different performances. The guards for Indiana, they only had to be like decent for them to get over the top, or for TJD to just completely destroy this matchup. And what they got was way below average from the guards, a monster from TJD as expected, but an unlikely source was my man Race Thompson, one of my top 5 highest owned players of last year. Sorry, I haven't run you as much this year, Race. You haven't been healthy for me this year, bud. But an unlikely source of destruction came from Race Thompson, and he took advantage of that matchup as well. 20 points, 9 rebounds, 1 block, 1 steal. I felt very upset with myself for not using Race, but how could I have with the way he's been playing this year? He destroyed. And that was enough for Indiana to they controlled it from start to finish, and Kent State never really got it going. Sincere Carey never really got it going. Malik Jacobs, he put up 9 rebounds, 7 assists, looked good, but never got his scoring going. Shot 3 for 11. Just, they didn't get anything from their bench hardly. Jalen Solinger looked okay. Chris Payton looked okay, but it just didn't work out for them, and that's what my main worry for Kent State was. Ultimately, I put a bet on Kent State because it did look like a spot they could beat, but Race Thompson was the X factor there, and he came through. Now they get to face Miami. Miami has a kid in Norchad Omier, when healthy, is as good as anyone down low, a great rebounder, a great shot blocker, sometimes gets himself into foul trouble with his aggressiveness. We didn't know. Heading into the day, Norchad hadn't been practicing, hadn't been doing anything. It seemed like a good bet that he was going to be out, and that really put me on Darnell Brody. I unfortunately messed up the locks. It was a happy accident. I messed up the lock times because, the tournaments, the game's changing, and I thought I had more time. And when I saw that Omier was starting, when I went to, okay, I got to take Brody out, there was no taking him out. The game had locked. But I would have been, you think you saw me tilt on round 1, day 1, you would have seen, it would be nothing like what you would have saw last night had I swapped Brody out and him proceed to put up 33, 35 fantasy points. That wouldn't have been good for my health at all. So I'm happy that accident happened. But what that did was give me some information, because I watched that game from start to finish. Miami did an amazing job getting into Tucker DeVry's shorts. They also limited the damage as much as they could to Roman Penn. Roman Penn affected the game in a lot of ways, had 7 assists, 6 rebounds, but he shot 4 for 13, didn't make any threes. They were, at the end there especially, they were not only missing every 3 from Tucker, but Penn started missing bunnies too, and layups that they had to have during that last 2 to 3 minute stretch, and they just couldn't buy a basket. And that sometimes happens. You get those games. It's a game of runs, and it was just a bad run for them. Brody kept crushing. He kept dominating. Norchad, you could tell, Norchad had a good game too. He had double-digit rebounds. He had a double-double. He did his thing. But he played 36 minutes. I don't know how he went from the savage injury he suffered against Duke and had to leave 1 minute in to just a week or 2 later coming back and playing 36 minutes. That Miami nil program, man, there's, anything is possible when you have a nil program like that. I'm just going to leave it at that. So he had the good stuff there to make him play. But he was definitely on the defensive end, not as aggressive as we normally see. So a lot of times we see Norchad going for these highlight reel blocks and really, really trying to muscle, welcoming a challenge like that against Brody. Brody had some inches on him, though. He's about 3 or 4 inches taller. Brody's almost 300 pounds. So, he's got damn near 50 pounds on him. Like, that just wasn't a matchup that Omier was going to body around like he normally does ACC centers. And he played good. Brody, defensively, Brody did what he could. He's just, being that size, not as fast. Omier's a lot more agile, and he was able to do some damage there on offense and collect the boards. But Brody also, with 20 and 9, was the best player on the court at times, and really showed me that this Miami team is going to have some problems there when they're giving up that size down low. And the guards on Miami do a good job of affecting negatively the other team for them negatively. So we saw Penn struggle, Wilkins struggle, Tucker struggle. Like Miller, Pack, Wong, that's a good group. They are definitely going to be able to limit some of the potential damage that Indiana guards will be able to do. Just kidding. Indiana guards aren't going to do any damage. Miami's perimeter defense is already so good. Now you're going to throw Trey Galloway at them. Now you're going to throw Tamar Bates, who I do like, actually. I think he, with the right developing and coaching staff and summer plan, can turn into a really fine player. Miller Kopp, like, there's just nobody on this Indiana perimeter that's going to have any fun. Jalen Hood-Schifino is really their only option out there that can do much, and he's going to get saddled with the absolute business end of the Miami defense on the perimeter. So look for TJD, who is not that much taller than Norchad, so that size differential isn't there, but he is very gifted. His skill set down low, he's got a very wide variety of post moves. He can hit jumpers. He's not a three-point shooter by any means, but he can definitely take advantage of this because he plays a lot bigger than he actually is. So it's a little bit different in that regard, but it's going to be similar in that the way he dismantled Kent State's front court is how I can envision him dismantling the Miami front court, Norchad or not. One thing about TJD is he draws a high number of fouls, almost 6 per 40, which is top 60 in the country. In Big Ten play, that number was right around 6.5, which was the 4th best in the conference. So he's going to be a risk, or Norchad's going to be at risk there of getting into some foul trouble. And if he plays not timid, but, backs down from contact like he was against Brody, we could just see TJ getting easy dunks and easy looks all game long. So I know I'm trying to argue to use Oscar, not TJ, but I just want to make it clear it's a tough decision because both are in phenomenal spots to produce. It's just Oscar's in a little bit better of a spot, and he's at a discount. I do wonder, though, if Trace Thompson if this is a thing now, because if Trace Thompson is showing up like that, he's also going to see a weaker defender on Miami. He's sitting there at 5'6". He's in that price range that you can make a really nice lineup of 5 to 6K guys. My specialty, the semi-balanced, lineup construction, where you play an Oscar or a TJD, and then you fill it up with Jordan Hawkins, Race Thompson, Key George, Trey Alexander. You play, one, maybe 2 of the sub 5K guys. Get yourself some value in there wherever you can, and call it good. Joe Munden. Maybe you play Munden, and then you have yourself a strong lineup. What I suspect is going to happen for the masses is they're going to try to jam TJD and Oscar in together because there is potential for 120 points combined, like as a floor. So it makes a lot of sense. But there is going to be a lot of risk when you're jamming your lineup with a bunch of cheapies. We're going to get to the Gonzaga game in a second, though, and there's several sub 5K guys that I do think are viable. Even though I think the Gonzaga guards are weaker than most people, they are going to be viable for this construction if you choose to go TJD and Oscar. So that's definitely a decision you're going to have to make. But I like Race Thompson at 5'6". I think, he's risky, obviously, but he was so good last year. Injuries have really hurt him this season. But his place as the Robin to TJD's Batman is when this team's at its best. And we saw that last game, and I think they're going to continue to try to live that way. You do have value pieces, like I mentioned, Trey Galloway, Miller Kopp, Malik Renew. But Renew is really going to only be in play if Race is in foul trouble or not effective. Then you see Malik playing more minutes. If Race is going to be effective, it's really going to hurt Malik, and he won't be that viable. So at 3.9, it seems decent, but I don't know if he gets enough minutes to pay off. But keep in mind, he only needs like 12 to 15 to pay it off I'm not sure he gets there. Miami side, they have a decided advantage when it comes to the backcourt. Pack at 5'8" is a fantastic price. I think we're looking at a slate that could potentially turn into very high scoring, which is the polar opposite of today's. Pack looks very good. They paid all that money for Pack. Like, let's call it what it is. They're very open about it. And at the time, it seemed like, why is he getting $500,000 to play? Like, Nigel Pack's good, but is he a superstar level, money? And throughout the season, he didn't look like that. It's been the, ACC Player of the Year, Isaiah Wong time most of the season. We've seen Jordan Miller really take that next step in his maturation, and he stepped up in a big way and become a superstar at the collegiate level himself. We've seen Wooga Poplar start to develop. We've seen Norchad Omier. He's great. So Pack just kind of was sleepy throughout the season, but when they struggled at times and they were on the ropes against Drake, even with Tucker DeVry shooting so poorly because of how good Brody was, the player that stepped up was not Wong. It was Pack, especially at the end. He had some key shots at the end. He got to the foul line, made all of his free throws, 21 real points on his way to 31.5 fantasy points. They drop him from 6'9" to 6'4" to 5'8". I don't know why. I was so happy with the way DK's algo had been with making these tight pricing. They've made a tremendous amount of errors on this slate. So Nigel Pack at 5'8" has to be in consideration. I suspect he will also be popular because of what he did last game, but there is risk because Pack is not the alpha on this team. It's Wong. And if Wong goes from shooting 1 for 10 like he did against Drake back to, 8 for 15 like he did against Duke, then Pack's offense takes a huge hit. Wong just couldn't make any shots. Him and Tucker DeVries were building a school with the amount of bricks that they were laying, and it was up to somebody else to step up. And it was Brody on the Drake side and Pack on the Miami side. So I like him. I'm on board with using him, but I do want to let you know it's a little bit riskier than you probably imagine. Jordan Miller is not going to be possible in your main because of the Oscar TJD, decision, but a great GPP play nonetheless. A little worse for the wear with Norchad back, so it does take some of his upside away, but he's still fine if you want to get there in large field. You do have Norchad Omier at 7'9", which is a great price. He was $9K or almost $9K for a lot of this, last 2 months of the season. 32 fantasy points despite shooting 2 for 9 from the field, 12 points, 14 rebounds, got to the foul line a lot, 8 of 9 from the foul line. He's actually a fairly decent free throw shooter at 73%. So if he's able to get, the Race Thompson League TJD group into foul trouble and go to the line, he will rack up points there. He has had 3 double-doubles in his last 4 games and was on pace to really just end the season hot until he got injured against Duke. And I had him during that Duke game. It was painful, but I'm happy to see he bounced back in only a week and looks to be great playing 35-plus minutes here against Indiana. Fouls be damned. Omier at 7'9" is also a very strong play as well. This is probably the best game for a mini stack. There are a couple of options on the slate where I don't mind that, like Creighton Baylor seems fine. Connecticut or Kentucky and Kansas State seems fine. But the one game where you can really expect a mini stack or full stack to be optimal is this Miami Indiana game by far. All right, TCU versus Gonzaga. So we have with the Zags a team that I don't feel the guards are all that good. Mike disagrees with me adamantly, and I respect that. We usually agree on a lot, so when we don't, it's kind of fun to banter back and forth. I just don't think they have the strongest guard play in the world, and I do think that's going to rear its ugly head for them. We're seeing it already. But they have a matchup with TCU that they can definitely exploit with their personnel. Starting off, Drew Timmy's 9-3. That's going to definitely drive his ownership north. Whenever he's been under 10K, he's been pretty popular, and he's been a pretty safe bet for, a 4X number, somewhere between 36 to 38. So I am fine with using him. I like Julian Strawther at 7'9". Strawther was the one that absolutely detonated in their round 1 matchup. They had a little bit of resistance from Grand Canyon. You remember plus 15.5. We were heavy on that during the appearance on Chris Meanstreet's show. They did cover that, and that I thought they would. Julian Strawther had 51 fantasy points. I do suspect people will chase that here against TCU. Strawther has a ton of talent. He had 28 points, 10 rebounds, 2 blocks, and a steal before fouling out at 34 minutes. Very, very good, to me, a good GBP play. I don't think you can use him in main because there is a volatility level there that I'm not super comfortable with. And the same can be said for Antoine Watson sitting there at 7'5". Watson has really become the third best player on this team. And you look at his last 5-6 games, he's been just crushing. St. Mary's, the team that, everybody fears their defense, and for good reason. 17-8, 4 steals, a block, 42 fantasy points, just a complete undressing of St. Mary's in that one. Chicago State, after that, he puts up 36 in that random non-con game. San Francisco, he puts up 20 and 7 for 38. Let's play St. Mary's again in the West WCC Finals. Puts up 33, 9 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists. He's out there dropping dimes. And then this game against Grand Canyon, 14 and 11 on his way to nearly 40 fantasy points. So Anton Watson, say what you will about him, he's playing the best basketball of his career. He played high school ball on the eastern part of the state. Did get the chance to see him play a few times as a, that's where I'm from, is Washington State. Split my time between the two areas of Cali and here. So I got a chance to see him, and I know how good Antoine can be, but he definitely has foul risks. He definitely has inconsistencies. There's issues with his game, but right now he's playing extremely well. And TCU has no Eddie Lampkin. And I know people are going to probably flock to Timmy and think, well, no Lampkin, Timmy's going to dominate. But his game's not to bang. It's Watson, man. And I feel like Watson could have a monster. But I'm not so sure that he's main team viable. He's much better as an alt play, lower owned GPP special that could absolutely break the slate. Now, where it gets interesting for your main team is with the guards, who I'm, like I said, not that high on usually. All of them are under 5K. Nolan Hickman at 4.9, Rasir Bolton at 4.8, and Malachi Smith at 4.7. Now, if we came into this season not knowing anything about the Gonzaga players other than what they did at past, in the past season or at their previous stop, and you knew Malachi Smith, had Illinois on the brink last year in the tournament for Chattanooga, great player, 8, 9K type of guy. You see him there at 4.7, you would probably be falling all over yourself to roster him. Rasir Bolton, been around, numerous programs, was mainly a role player during his freshman season, but he showed flashes of being a productive and strong collegiate level basketball player during his freshman season when he was at Penn State. He showed flashes. Goes to Iowa State for a couple of years, becomes an absolute just monster, high usage, high shot rate guy that you pay 8K for, and he's putting up 35s. Then he comes to Gonzaga last year, shows some of that. For the most part, no. He was an excellent three-point shooter last year. Still is okay, but he shot 46% last year compared to 40 now. And then this year, he's just been really hit or miss. He hasn't taken that next step. In fact, it seems like he's almost taken further steps back from where he was last year. And last year was already steps back from where he was at Iowa State. So part of the problem is the fact that they're running a rotation with these Gonzaga guards that just it hurts the production. They're not getting a chance to get into a rhythm, and unless they're playing really high level D that night, they're just not getting more than 20 to 25 minutes at best. Hunter Salas, who stepped up lately, I know he had 4 fouls against Grand Canyon, but defensively he was playing a little bit better and he earned more minutes, and that was causing Rasir Bolton and Malachi Smith to lose time. Nolan Hickman as a starter and initiator of the offense and the maestro at times has been safe from losing as many minutes. You're seeing him play about 28 to 30. He's just very steady. Even though he's not producing as much in the box scores, he's also not making a ton of mistakes that's hurting Gonzaga's chances to win. So he's typically the one out there. It's Salas, who's now in the mix getting minutes, that's hurting Bolton and Malachi Smith's upside. Because, honestly, when I see that 4.7 from Malachi Smith, I just want to plug him in. I know he hasn't been great, but I really feel like that price for him is just way too low and way too advantageous. And the TCU matchup is good for Gonzaga all across the board and multiple positions. But we just can't expect more than 20 minutes from Malachi. And you might counter and say, well, you're fine playing Dylan Disu, who typically only plays 21 minutes. You got lucky, Walter, playing him tonight because he played 31 minutes, 30 plus, and he crushed. But typically you were fine playing him even if he played 22 minutes. And you're right. I did say I don't care if he only gets 22, he's going to crush. Malachi Smith is not Dylan Disu. So we're not looking at the same level of fantasy point per minute. We're not looking at the same level of usage. We're not looking at the same skill set. It's just he needs the minutes. As a volume scorer, you've got to have volume scorers need what? Playing time. They got to be on the floor for more than a couple minutes at a time. And the way sometimes this rotations happen, by the time he gets into a rhythm, he's out, and the next, Salas is in, and he's lost it. So it's really, really tough to back Malachi Smith, even at the 4.7 price. But it is a great price. GPP wise, absolutely high level value. But when you consider it in your main lineup, it doesn't become a high level value anymore. And that's part of the issue and why I'm so worried about, even possibly using him there. Same thing can be said for Rasir Bolton. To me, I think Malachi Smith's the better player. Rasir Bolton his minutes have just jumped all up and down. And since the scoring has betrayed him, he's, especially the last month of the season, he just hasn't been producing. He does have an ability to get peripherals, maybe more so than Malachi at times, but he's another one that's just seemingly capped at that 20 to 25 minute mark. So again, the price is right. The price is good, but there's no guarantee on the return on production here. We could be looking at a 10. We could be looking at a 22. Hickman is probably your best bet at 4.9, and obviously you have to pay a little bit more for him. But if you need value and you're going to go with Gonzaga guard, I do at this point think it's Hickman. He's got a high pedigree, very highly rated recruit, came in with Chet, during the class before 2 seasons ago, and it was the Hunter Salas group, and Gonzaga's got this amazing class. Then Chet Holmgren comes in, their recruiting's great, Suggs, but Hickman hasn't gotten the same level yet with his potential of those guys, but he has that potential and just hasn't quite scratched it yet. And there's a potential for him to maybe become a March hero if Gonzaga makes a run. I mean, obviously the trio, Watson, Timmy, and Strother, are going to be a big reason why, but there's that guy that steps up. Gonzaga is typically at their best when they have a point guard, that's just absolutely crushing, making right decisions, scoring when they need a bucket. There was a particular point guard by the name of Josh Perkins. When he was running this group, they just were awesome. Mistakes didn't happen as much. This is when they're at their best, and they just haven't had that level of guard play. So it's very, very difficult. When Suggs was there, that's why they almost won, because they're at their best during that. So I do expect Gonzaga to eventually falter here, but I like them against TCU, and I think Hickman has the opportunity and the potential to really break out here and become the next great Gonzaga point guard. But he's definitely got a lot of developing still to do. But at 4.9, he's definitely in play in this matchup against TCU. So you got to make a decision between those three. It's very tough, I know. You want to go way off the board. Hunter Salas has played 19 plus minutes in 3 of his last 4. Very low fantasy point per minute player, though, but he's near min price. You get 3x out of him. I think you're feeling good about it. TCU side, my man Jacoby Coles basically hits the game winner last night for TCU against ASU. He is going to be the main benefactor without Lampkin. We're seeing Xavier Cork, who, without Lampkin, or when he's banged up, getting the starts. But Cork's just a very lower level player in terms of he's talented, don't get me wrong, but he's not out there affecting the game in ways like scoring and high level rebounding. His defense is good, but he's doing the things on defense that aren't showing up in the box score. So while he's getting those starts, he's not getting the sustainable minutes. They're running Jacoby Coles off the bench because they like to have him as a sixth man who has the energy, the high usage, a great scoring ability to kind of punch that second unit in the mouth or some tired first unit starters, and he comes in and absolutely can get to the rack at will. I hope they continue to use him in that role and give him more minutes, though, because he needs to be trending more towards the 30-minute mark. We're seeing it with the other starters. All 4 of them last night, between O'Bannon, Miller, Miles, and Bow, played 31-plus minutes. Cork played 13, Coles played 24, and then PV came in there and played 15, and what he did was spot, and give water breaks to the other 4. Shahada Wells and Rondell Walker just, with this current, group, they're just not getting minutes. Even though we know how good Shahada Wells can be, he's just not going to break out and get minutes here in this spot. They're going to run a 6-7-man rotation. Coles, though, I really like. He's sub 5K. If I don't want to deal with the Gonzaga guard roulette, Forwards, which is typically a hard position to fill. I know I say it all the time, but I want to keep reminding you, you have an option to play Jacoby Coles at 4.9. I don't think many people will. I think they're going to think that, he doesn't start. His minutes are sporadic. He's just, take it or leave it with him. He's a lower level play. But I think we see similar to with Disu, and I'm certainly not saying he's Disu from a skill set standpoint, but I think we see minutes rise. I was pretty high on Disu's minutes going up today. They went up higher than I thought. I had him for 26. He played 30 plus. Coles, I think we see play somewhere between 23 to 25, but it's going to keep trending upwards. And if TCU somehow advances here, Coles is going to keep seeing his role in this offense on this team keep going north because he's just too good to not play in there. Chuck O'Bannon has his moments, and he's played well, and he looked decent, but he's very, very hard to peg, and there's times where he disappears for long stretches. Emmanuel Miller tends to beat up on lesser front courts, better front courts. Sometimes he struggles. And then you have Damian Bow, who has been great this season filling in while Miles has been dealing with various ailments. And then you have Mike Miles, who, we talked about it on the pre-TCU slate on just the other day. He hasn't been showing up. It's hard to utilize him. His price was very nice that day, sitting there at 7.2. It's even better now under 7K, but we hadn't seen that breakout from him, and we weren't sure that we would. And that was put to rest very quickly against ASU as he put up 40.5 fantasy points, 26 real, 12 of 14 at the line. If this game is close down the stretch, Miles clearly going to be the guy they rely on, and all questions have been answered for me as how healthy he is and if he's shaking off the rust. It definitely seems so. So I like Miles at 6.9. He's a great, I think, overall GPP play. There's just so many plays on this slate in that range between 5.5 and 7K. I have a very large player pool right now, and I need to prune it down further, of course. There's just a ton of plays here. Like, there's actually a path to being optimal without Oscar and TJ if all of these mid-range guys, or not all of them, but like 75% of them all pop, and they could. So I like Miles. I love Jacoby Coles. Coles for me is a main team play. I'd rather use him than Nolan Hickman, just so you guys know where I stand there. I know they're different positions, but fills a forward spot for me cheaply, has the usage rate, has a shot rate. Overall, I think his upside is way higher than Hickman's. Floor, of course, a little bit lower, but he's got major pep in his step after getting that game-winning shot where he just cooked them to the basket. Look for Coles to play more minutes here and be a very solid play. Chuck O'Bannon's a guy that I can honestly say I haven't used this season. Dating back probably like 2 years ago was the last time I think I used him when he was really cheap. He has played well, 22 plus fantasy points in 3 straight games against ASU there. He had some clutch threes that he hit. Shot 13 times, which was definitely on the higher side for him. He's typically in that 5 to 7 shot range, and the 13 was actually the highest number of shots he has taken since November 14th when he took 14 against Northwestern State. So a little bit of a blip outlier game, certainly. But you look at his last 3, he's definitely shooting more from long range. 3 for 8 against ASU, 2 for 3 against Texas, and 4 for 7 against K-State. So that's a number that definitely is an eye-opener if you do want to end up using O'Bannon. He's taking a lot more shots, and that might continue here against Gonzaga. I certainly don't hate it. The Gonzaga 3-point defense is not great, and they're definitely, if there's a weak link to that defense, it can sometimes be with the long-range shooters. So look for an opportunity for O'Bannon to definitely pan out at that 5-4. For me, it's one of those Waltz guys situations, so I can't give you a necessarily like strong reason why or analytical reason why I want Coles over O'Bannon, other than Coles is my guy and O'Bannon's not. And that's good enough for me. Other than that, Bow at 8K, he's fine, but you have Miles at 6.9. So if you're going with the TCU guy, I think you definitely want to go there. Bow continues to produce at a high level, though. His price has dropped $700, so he's in play, certainly. I think I could get down with using some Damian Bow, but it's more of an all-team play at this point. I just don't think we'll have the luxury to use him because there's so many other options at or below his range that I want to use. He's just not the priority. Johnny asked me, is Wong my most hated DFS guy? No, not even close. Wong and I don't have a problem with Wong, man. I know you think I do. He's fine. I don't ever use him, but he's definitely not my most hated. I think my most hated is Joey Hauser, but I don't. It's a different kind of hate. Joey Hauser used to be chalk all the time, and he really hurt me his first year with Michigan State, using him or fading him. I don't worry about him now because he doesn't affect anything enough, and I don't think anyone ever uses him. But I still have a strong dislike for him. So, but no, he's not my most hated. Somebody else will have that spot. It's a spot that I don't hold a grudge with. So, and he also says St. John's is about to finalize a deal with Rick Pitino. I haven't seen anything with that final yet, but I've been here talking with you guys, so maybe he has. Core wise for me, so this is a difficult one. I really like what's gone well for us during these first few tournament slates is that the player pool is nice and tight. We're able to really establish a pecking order, a priority order, and we've been able to stick with that. And we've also had it where our top plays happen to be lower owned. So we're cruising right along here. The problem with this slate is there's a lot of players that could pay off, and because of that, we're expecting a higher scoring slate, and because of that, there's going to be a lot of overlap with our priority list and the industries. So we're not going to have quite as much leverage as we probably would like and what we've gotten used to over the last 3 days, but it's definitely still going to be able to exist, and we're going to be able to find it somewhere. As of now, and I'm going to have a write-up for tomorrow as well, so you guys will be able to, compare the two and really start to build out your lineups that way. But as of now, my core is this, and I really want it to be Oscar. I mean, I really think Oscar is going to just destroy it. So core play number 1 is Trey Alexander. That might shock some folks because I'm always down on Creighton, and I'm worried about Trey Alexander because usually if I go Kaluma, then Trey goes off. If I go Trey, Kaluma would go off. I haven't used Trey Alexander as much this year, though, so I'm hoping that trend from before doesn't rear its ugly head. But at 6'4" against Baylor, I think Trey Alexander's a very strong play. He fits into a balanced build, but he also builds into my specialty, which is that semi-balanced build. So Trey Alexander, core play number 1. Second on the core list, man, there's just so many good plays. It makes it very, very difficult. I'm going to give you a value play this time because last night the core was pretty expensive, with Hodge, Tosin, and Disu. Didn't leave a lot of room for value plays there. You had to kind of, build it out from there. But today I'll give you one that'll help you with your lineup making. And that's going to be Joey Munden from FDU. Not a guy that I'm pegging to put up a huge score, but at 4-4, I like his chances at a minimum 3x. Give us, that at least, and then the other guys will cover the rest of the slack. That's kind of where my head's at with it. So it's a salary play, but I also think Munden can put up 20 with the way that he plays and the minutes that he does get. I know you have the Gonzaga guards we just looked at. We've got Cole, so I basically borderline core with Coles, but Munden just feels like at that 4-4 price, a safer look and somebody that we can get into our lineup. The only problem is it's a guard spot, which is very valuable in the slate. We don't want to just give our guard slots to anyone. We want them to make sure that they're going to pan out, but Munden, he just gives us a lot of flexibility with our lineup. So that's core play number 2. Core play number 3, and the final one. I don't know, maybe I'm too high on Oscar. Maybe I need to backpedal here. Maybe I need to, cool out a little bit. But I'm not one to backpedal off of my takes. So I spent so much time talking about Oscar. It would be kind of uncharacteristic of me to not have him in the core or to say, Trace Jackson Davis is my core. So I will give you that third core as a high-priced Oscar Tshiebwe. How does he fail here? It just, and I don't want to challenge the DFS gods to make him fail. So pull up the nearest piece of wood and knock on it for all of us. But this is just an amazing spot for him to throw down a huge score. Biggest decision on the slate is if you play him and Trace together, or if you have to pick one or the other. It's kind of like that ED TJD decision from yesterday, and also Oscar and Oscar and TJD as well. ED not so much. Well, ED was okay, I guess, but the other guys definitely crushed. So we're in that same boat with these guys. You're really gonna have to make that decision. or if you're going to go full stars and scrubs, which is fine, and then just run a bunch of values out there. But keep in mind that 5 to 7K range has some real heavy hitters. Jordan Hawkins, Tristan Newton, Trey Alexander, Key George, Elijah Martin from FAU is kind of a sneaker, a real sneaky, option that could pay off. Norchad Omier sub 8K. There's just so many different options here that we can look at. Now, Posh play of the day usually ends up in the core. And I think Trey Alexander will be popular. I think Munden could actually end up getting some ownership, and I'm not sure on Oscar. I think TJ. It's clear TJD is going to grow or have the most ownership from what we saw yesterday, but it's not as if Oscar is going to be super low owned either. So he doesn't really qualify for the Posh play. So I'm going to take the uncharacteristic step of not coring the Posh play of the day, but obviously I play the Posh play of the day. So I guess I'm kind of giving you my 4 core by extension. It is going to be a player on UConn. Shouldn't be doing this because he's hurt me twice in a row. I didn't play him last slate, thankfully, and he didn't do well. But Jordan Hawkins of UConn is the official Posh play of the day. I'm giving him that label to help him get out of the muck. He's only 6'3". Andre Jackson is going to be the guy that people look at, or Tristan Newton because of their low prices. Hawkins a few hundred more, but they're almost 30% shot rate. The St. Mary's UConn front court battle, just to rehash it real quick, it's going to be violent. It's going to be physical. Hawkins is going to be required to take and make a lot of shots here. So the Posh play of the day for the audience there at home, for your pleasure, is Jordan Hawkins. All right, PrizePicks. Let's go. We're just about done here. I can't even begin to tell you how, in even just 2 years ago, I could pull these all-nighters, good to go. Something about crossing that 35-year-old barrier, to your when you're closer to the 40 side. I don't know, man. I don't know what happened, but I'm too old to be staying up all night. I actually took. I feel really old now, and this is how I can tell you I know, because I took a nap. Raz always takes these naps, and I always give him a hard time. I took a nap before the show, a nap, right? And I actually, take naps with my 1-year-old kid too, which are nice. But normally before the show, I'm dialed in. But I had to take a nap. I had to take a nap, guys. All right, PrizePicks plays. The board is full. It's a very tasty board. Now, the Jordan Hawkins PRA has not been hitting, and it's hurt us in the last 2 slates. But I'm definitely going back to it. It's 18.5 on PrizePicks. His fantasy total there is 22.5. I like the over on both because I think he does come back into an elite level of play. I'm really, really heavy on Jordan Hawkins. This is my Disu play of the day. I know it's the Posh play. We'll modify it to the Disu play of the day for the rest of the season, the rest of this tournament, because it just seems like he's going to have to perform at a high level for them to advance. I just think everybody else on the front court will be neutralized, and it's hard to trust Newton, and Jackson is really affecting the game in other ways other than scoring. So Hawkins, I feel like, is going to have one of his 20, 25-point real games. Over 18.5 PRA just seems like an inevitable piece of cake that tastes so good and should absolutely take us to the window. We have some light numbers on Key George and Trey Alexander, but I'm kind of waffling on the PRA or the FPS. They're 20.5 PRA on both. I just think there's going to be some other stats here in steals. They aren't even offering a fantasy total for Trey Alexander anyways. They're only giving us a PRA for him and Key George, so I guess it doesn't matter. But 20.5 PRA for Key George is the one that I'm looking at between the two. And I know I just scored Trey Alexander, but I think he's going to get some non-PRA stats too. That's why I'm not quite looking there. They've made TJD's fantasy total 51.9, by the way. I'm tempted to just say, let's do the under, but unders are no fun, as Razzle likes to say, and that actually might be too low at the end of the day. It's hard to say. One other one, Mike Miles, over 25.3 fantasy points. I don't know, something that he got that look in his eye again last game, and it seems like he may have crossed the barrier there and finally shaken off that injury rust, because that looked like the Mike Miles that we are used to seeing and know what he's capable of. So I'm looking for him to break out in a big way here. One other sneak, Jacoby Cole's over 9.5 real points. There you go. That'll do it. We made it. Let's just check in with the chat here. Tony says, if not Oscar, who would it be? Well, you mean on Kentucky or you mean on the slate? Because I just got done talking about TJD. So if you're not playing Oscar, then Trace Jackson Davis is your pay up, right? I don't think that you can get away with not playing one of them. That is a good balanced build out there somewhere, and I'm the king of balanced builds, but I think you play one or the other. So if that's what the question is, it's TJD. If you're asking me not Oscar, who else on Kentucky, then it's Antonio Reeves. And I know they play different positions, but Antonio Reeves is going to shoot like 100 times and be close to scoring 30 real points just because there's no Severe Wheeler. Kason Wallace is taking on more of a facilitator role. And when they need a bucket now, they just go to Reeves. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns? You want to get them in right now. Johnny says, Oscar had 13 boards in 7 minutes. You should talk about him. Yeah. Do you think I should talk about Oscar? You're probably right. I should probably be talking about Oscar at some point on this show. I should have probably brought up Oscar Tshiebwe and about how he's such a good play. I don't know why or how I neglected to talk about Oscar Tshiebwe. I apologize for that, Johnny. I'll try to do better next time. Hawkins point prop is 12.5 locked in. Yeah, let's do it, man. Jordan Hawkins bounce back game. I love it. And that is, in case you're wondering, the Johnny that used to come on Blog Talk Radio and talk with me and do some very magical things in the sports media space. So he is a funny guy. I'm just trolling with him, and he's trolling me. So he knows I talked about Oscar Tshiebwe for like 20 minutes. All right, I think that'll finish. So the rest of this week, just enjoy yourself. Watch the games tomorrow. Rest up. I would highly encourage you guys to take Sunday night and whatever you do to relax. Like after that last game, go to sleep early. Take a hot shower. Beat it up with the wife, whatever it is that is good, relaxing, fun for you. I would recommend doing that and taking the night to just clear your head, get everything back, your chi in alignment, and then get ready for that Sweet 16 run, because we are going to be right back to it on Wednesday night, and there is going to be plenty of content coming your way from a written article standpoint. Our super show will be on. PrizePicks trackers, betting trackers. We'll have exposures up. We'll be in the Discord talking strategy. There's going to be an endless amount of content for you guys to consume. And the way that we're playing, the way we're hitting, it's going to be a very profitable tournament. It already has. And I'm really looking forward to giving you guys even more information, even better information, and seeing you guys return back with the green screen, showing us that you were able to win a lot of money, not only with our info, but compared with your research and putting them together and building winners. So appreciate you guys a lot. We'll be back next Wednesday, 9 p.m. PST. That'll break down the Sweet 16 slate. Then we'll be back Thursday night, same time, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night. 4 shows in 4 nights, all at 9 p.m. PST, midnight EST. We're going to take a couple-day break from the shows. Definitely we'll hit you with some written content for those slates. And if there's an NIT slate that pops up there, CBI games or whatever, showdown slate, or 3 or 4 game slate, there will be an article and Discord discussion for those as well. Don't you worry. We'll be grinding every basketball game at the collegiate level that we possibly can until it is over and we're sleeping in May, which we don't even really sleep in May because you MLB guys are there. I got my WNBA thing, and then we're prepping for college football. So we don't really sleep in May, but it's fun to say. And, Rothstein is full of these one-liners that he says, and it's definitely a time to relax here very soon. Thanks, guys. I appreciate all of the support you guys continue to give the show. We'll be back here next week, Wednesday night. Thanks to Mike, Razzle, my man Pete, who jumped on the show a couple of days ago, Randall, Chris, and everybody else at FTN that worked so hard to make us the best in the world. Thanks, guys. Best of luck tomorrow. Make sure that you don't miss out on that special Jordan Hawkins play tomorrow. He's going to do something special for all of us. See you guys later.